I'm going to treat this as the first long installment and keep it in pure voiceover prose, with no headings or citations, so it can continue cleanly when you say continue. Tonight, we step into the warm, dusty office of a 1920s Memphis cotton classer, where the codes on Bale tickets quietly help the day begin. Settle in and let the work move slowly. The morning air holds a faint smell of river damp, floor oil, old paper, and cotton lint. As we stand beside the long table and listen to the soft scrape of a sample knife, you are here before the street has fully woken, before the wagons and motor trucks have made their busier noise along the warehouse doors. In 1920s Memphis, the cotton classer's day begins with small signs, each one plain to a trained eye and nearly invisible to anyone else. A tag, a twist of lint, a penciled mark, a grade written in a tight hand. We followed those marks gently now, because they were not just office shorthand. They were the quiet language of bales, buyers, mills, and river trade. The room is not grand, though Memphis cotton touches money, land, rail lines, and ships. It is a working room with high windows, a long counter, ink bottles, sample books, ticket hooks, and drawers that open with a dry wooden sound. Dust rests in the corners where the broom misses. Cotton fibers float in the slant of early light, so pale they almost look like breath. You can imagine the classer brushing them from his cuff without thinking, because lint has a way of joining the body after years of this work. A cotton classer in Memphis does not judge a bale by weight alone. The weight belongs to the scale man, and the bale number belongs to the clerk, but the classer has a softer and more searching task. He looks at color, leaf, staple, preparation, and the feel of the fiber between finger and thumb. The code that appears afterward may be brief, perhaps only a few letters and figures in a ledger, yet it carries the long, quiet labor of looking. The samples arrive folded, rolled, or tucked into brown wrappers, sometimes with a little grit still caught inside the lint. You lift one with care. It has the dry softness of something made by sun, weather, soil, and hands. The classer opens it on the table and lets it loosen. There is a smell there, faint and earthy, not perfume, not smoke, but the honest smell of fields, sacks, gin stands, wooden floors, and weather that has already passed. In the 1920s, Memphis sits as one of the great cotton cities of the American South, close to the river and tied to the farms of Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and beyond. The cotton comes in by wagon, by rail, by river, by habit. It comes from farms where people have watched the sky all season, and from gins where seed and fiber have been pulled apart in a steady mechanical roar. By the time it reaches the classer, the noise has softened into paper, samples, and code. The strange thing about the codes is that they are both small and powerful. A few marks can affect a price. A few marks can decide where a bale will go. A few marks can tell a mill buyer whether the fiber is fit for cloth that needs smoothness, strength, or ordinary usefulness. And yet, on the table, it begins with a person standing quietly in morning light, separating a tuft of cotton with patient fingers. We stay near the table for a while because this is where the day finds its rhythm. The classer pulls a sample apart, not roughly, but with the steady confidence of someone who has done it thousands of times. He looks for color first, because color tells a story that weather has written. White cotton may be bright or creamy. It may be tinged, stained, dull or gray from exposure. In Memphis, that difference matters, and the code must carry it. There are names that sound almost plain when spoken aloud, but inside the cotton office they carry exact meaning. Good middling, strict middling, middling. The words sit in the mouth like old trade terms, gentle and worn from use. You hear them, and you might think they are simple judgments, but each one has lived beside standard samples, argument, practice, and a great deal of quiet memory. A classer learns by comparison. He does not simply invent the grade from the air. He measures what he sees against standards, against boxes of official samples, against years of bales moving across the table. The eye learns the difference between clean and leafy, between bright and dull, between smooth preparation and rough handling. The hand learns too. Sometimes the fingers know before the mind has found the word. The official standards helped make the codes more dependable, though each office still had its habits and voices. By the 1920s, cotton grading had become less like local gossip and more like a shared language, shaped by federal standards, exchange rules, and the needs of long distance buying. In a Memphis cotton room, this meant the classer could mark a ticket with confidence. A man in another city could read it and understand enough. Still, the codes had a human warmth. They were written by hand, copied by clerks, checked against samples, and sometimes disputed in low voices. Ink could blot, pencil could fade, a hurried letter could look like another letter if the day had been long. So the work required neatness as well as judgment. You can feel the care in the small pause before the classer writes. Because a code should settle a question, not create another one. The table may hold several samples at once, each tied to a Bale number and a receipt. The classer keeps them apart with calm discipline. One sample is creamy and clean, another carries peppery leaf specks, like tiny dark flecks caught in snow. Another feels short in the pull, as if the fibers end too soon between the fingers. Each one waits for its small place in the ledger, where the code will make it speak. The sound of the room is mild. Paper slides. A chair leg knocks softly against the floor. Someone clears his throat near the tall desk. Outside, the city gathers itself with hooves, engines, voices, and the occasional whistle from rail or river. Inside, we remain with the cotton, and the work is almost meditative. Look, touch, compare, mark. Look again. Let the sample rest in the hand. The codes for grade are only part of the day. Staple length matters deeply, because cotton fiber must pass through machines and become yarn. And yarn depends on length, strength, and evenness. A classer draws out the fibers and estimates their length by eye and touch, comparing them to known measures: 7/8, 15/16, 1 inch, 1 1/16. The numbers are spoken softly, but they can travel far. You feel the fiber stretch and separate. It does not stretch like rubber. It draws out as a fine line of tiny hairs, catching against skin and air. A practiced classer can lay the fibers across a dark surface, comb them with his fingers, and see the average length emerge from what first seemed like a loose cloud. The code for staple may be brief, but behind it is the quiet patience of measuring softness. In Memphis, where cotton from many districts passed through warehouses and offices, classes became translators between field and market. A farmer might know the year by rain and bowl opening. A gin man might know it by the sound of machinery and the amount of trash carried in the seed cotton. A buyer might know it by contracts and mill needs. The classer, standing between them, reads the cotton itself. The odd codes worked because they saved breath and time. Instead of writing a long sentence about color, leaf, staple, preparation, and condition, the office could use compact marks that trained people understood. M might stand for middling. SM might mean strict middling. LM might be low middling. Other marks could follow, shaping a small message that moved through ledgers, tags, invoices, and telegrams. To an outsider, such marks might look like a private puzzle. To the classer, they were a tidy cupboard. Every symbol had its place. Every place had a use. You can imagine the satisfaction of reaching for the right code the way a carpenter reaches for the right plane. Not with excitement, but with ease. The beauty lies in the fit between hand, eye, and habit. A chapter of the morning begins at the sample table, but it soon reaches the bale room beyond. The warehouse is cooler near the doors, where damp air comes in from the street and mingles with the dry smell of jute bagging. Bales stand in rows, wrapped and compressed, each one heavy with field labor and machine pressure. Their ties catch a dull glint when light falls across them. Here, the codes must match the physical cotton waiting in silence. When a sample is drawn from a bale, the act is practical and plain. The bagging is opened or pierced, the cotton is pulled from the proper place, and the sample is taken so it represents the bale as fairly as possible. A careless sample can mislead the whole office. A good one is honest. You can feel the classer's respect for that honesty, because his code depends on what the sample truly shows. The warehousemen know the rhythm around him. They move with hooks, tags, chalk, and lists. Their boots make a dull sound on plank floors. Their hands are rough from ties and bagging. When a Bale number is called, someone answers without hurry, and the number travels from mouth to paper to sample. This is how the cotton keeps its name in a room full of cotton that might otherwise seem all the same. But no bale is quite like another. One may carry the mark of a wet picking day with colour dimmed and leaf more stubborn. Another may show better preparation at the gin, the lint open and smoother, easier on the eye. Another may feel strong, as if the fibers hold together with quiet purpose. The class's job is to notice these things without drama and to give them a code that buyers can trust. The Memphis cotton classer is not working in isolation. Around him are brokers, clerks, warehousemen, exchange members, railroad agents, compress operators, and buyers who need the day's facts to be orderly. Cotton is a crop, but by the time it reaches this room, it is also paperwork. The codes turn touch into record. They let a soft fiber become a line in a book, and then a price, and then a shipment. There is a comfort in how many hands know their part. The clerk writes neatly. The sampler keeps tickets straight. The classer studies the lint. The warehouse man returns the sample or sets it aside. Nobody needs to say much when the routine is well learned. The room works like a low machine made of people, paper, wood, and cotton dust, all moving at a pace that seems slow until you watch it closely. We drift back toward the office, where the light has strengthened, and the table is brighter now. The morning heat is beginning to gather under the windows. Memphis can be warm even when the day starts gently, and the cotton room holds heat in its walls. A fan may turn overhead with a soft, uneven murmur. Papers lift slightly at the corners, then settle again. The class's eyes rest often on standard samples, because memory is useful, but standards are steadier. These samples may be kept in boxes or cabinets, protected from dirt and handling as much as possible. They represent the grades, not as descriptions alone, but as actual cotton. You compare cotton with cotton. That is part of the reason the work feels grounded. The code grows from something seen and touched. To compare two samples, you bring them near each other under good light. You look for brightness, depth of color, amount of leaf, and the general character of the lint. The fingers lift and loosen. The eye travels across the surface. A small dark speck can matter, but not every speck matters equally. A classer learns proportion. He learns when a sample is truly one grade and when it merely leans toward another. This is where the oddness of the codes becomes useful. Cotton quality does not always fall into clean boxes. It shifts by shade, speck, length, and feel, like weather preserved in fiber. The code gives the office a way to make a decision anyway. It is not magic. It is trained compromise repeated so often that it becomes a working piece between the messy world and the needs of commerce. You may hear a quiet discussion at the table. One man thinks the sample is strict, low, middling. Another thinks it might hold at middling if the color is allowed more weight than the leaf. The voices do not rise. The cotton lies between them like a small cloud, waiting. In the end, someone reaches for the accepted mark, and the code goes down. The day moves on. The code for color can be especially delicate. White cotton is not always simply white. It may be creamy, spotted, tinged, yellowed, gray, or stained by weather and handling. In the 1920s, as standards became more formal, these distinctions helped buyers and sellers speak with fewer misunderstandings. In Memphis, where many kinds of cotton met, such distinctions saved time. They also saved the room from endless explanation. The smell of ink grows stronger near the clerk's desk. A ledger lies open, its ruled lines ready for Bale numbers, marks, grades, and comments. The clerk's pen moves with a tiny scratch, then pauses, then moves again. You can almost feel the slight resistance of paper under the nib. Each entry is modest, yet the ledger becomes a map of the morning, a record of cotton passing from field memory into trade language. Some codes were spoken, some written, and some carried by tag. A buyer might ask for a lot described in familiar shorthand. A clerk might copy an abbreviation onto a sales sheet. A warehouse ticket might hold the mark that connects the sample to the bale. The same few signs could travel from room to room, gaining meaning because everyone had learned to trust the pattern. That trust was part of the work. By late morning, The classer's hands may be dry from handling cotton. Fine lint clings to the creases of the fingers. The cuff of a dark sleeve shows pale dust. A glass of water sits somewhere nearby, touched between samples, leaving a faint ring on the desk. The body becomes part of the routine, accepting the heat, the dust, the standing, and the careful looking. You settle into that rhythm with him. There is no need to hurry the judgment. A rushed grade is no kindness to anyone. The cotton has waited through planting, chopping, picking, ginning, baling, hauling, and storage. It can wait a little longer while a person reads it properly. That is one of the quiet lessons of this work, that patience sometimes becomes accuracy when it is practiced every day. And as the morning wears on, we follow the code from the classes table into the paper world that made Memphis cotton move. The office clerks sit where light is good and interruptions are ordinary. They work with ledgers, ticket files, scale sheets, warehouse receipts, and messages that must be copied exactly. The cotton classes code is useful only if it survives this paper journey. A mark written carelessly can become another mark. A Bale number misplaced by one line can send confusion through a sale. So the clerk's work is quiet, but it is never careless. You hear the stamp pad close with a soft thud. You hear paper being squared against the desk edge. There is the smell of paste, ink, tobacco, cotton dust, and warm varnished wood. The room feels close now, warmed by bodies and by the sun leaning against the windows. Someone opens a transom for air. The city sound enters lightly, then settles behind the scratching of pens. Memphis cotton offices in the 1920s depended on repetition. A bale comes in, a sample is drawn, the cotton is classed. The code is written, the code is copied, the lot is assembled. The buyer reads the marks. Nothing about this seems grand when watched moment by moment, yet the pattern held together a trade that stretched from rural farms to textile mills far away. The codes often belonged to a whole language of abbreviated judgment. Grade might appear as letters, staple might be written as a short measure. Condition might be noted if the cotton was damp, rough, mixed, or poorly prepared. A mark could suggest whether a bale belonged comfortably in a lot or needed to be set aside. In this way, the office sorted the world gently, one entry at a time. A classer must think of the mill, though he may never see the mill that uses the cotton. He knows that longer staple can spin into finer yarn. He knows cleaner cotton may run better through machinery. He knows rough preparation can make trouble later. The code is not only about price in Memphis, it is also about usefulness. Somewhere beyond the river, beyond the rail yard, beyond the office door. The clerk may not feel the cotton as often as the classer does, but he feels the importance of order. His fingers know the ledgers, his eyes know the columns. He may place a blotter gently over fresh ink before turning to the next line. You can imagine the small relief of a clean page well kept, every code legible, every bale accounted for, every mark where it belongs. The odd codes quietly worked because they reduce the chance of too much talk. Long explanations invite memory to wander. Short marks, used by trained people, hold steady. They allow a broker to compare lots quickly, a warehouse to locate bales, and a buyer to understand quality without unfolding every sample. The code becomes a folded form of attention. It is attention made portable. Of course, the code never replaces the cotton. The sample remains nearby, a small witness. If a buyer wishes to see it, the cotton can be opened again, lifted to the light, and judged by eye and hand. The code begins the conversation. The sample confirms it. Together they make the trade feel less like guessing and more like practiced seeing. There are human pauses inside this office rhythm. A clerk rubs his wrist. A classer looks out toward the street for a moment. Someone mentions the heat. Someone asks about a delayed rail car or a lot expected from Arkansas. The talk is ordinary, low, and scattered. The work continues beneath it, steady enough that a person can speak and still keep his place. At midday, the room changes by temperature before it changes by time. The floorboards feel warmer through the soles of shoes. The smell of cotton becomes drier. The ink in the bottle seems thicker, though perhaps that is only the feeling of a long morning. You may hear a bell somewhere outside, or a whistle, or the layered murmur of men moving in and out of warehouse doors. Lunch is simple. It may be carried from home, bought nearby, or taken in a place where office men and warehouse men sit with sleeves rolled and hats resting beside them. Bread, coffee, beans, meat, fruit, whatever the day allows. The class's hands may still smell faintly of cotton and paper even after washing. Some work stays with you through a meal, not as a burden, but as a trace. After lunch, the eyes return to the table and the codes continue. This is when fatigue can make itself known. The classer must guard against seeing what he expects to see. He must let each sample be itself. A row of similar bales can lull the mind, but the hand must keep noticing. The codes depend on freshness of attention, even when the day has become familiar. There is a quiet humility in that. The work does not reward showiness. It rewards steadiness. You do not need a loud voice to be useful here. You need a good eye, clean habits, and a memory trained by thousands of small comparisons. The Memphis cotton classer lives inside distinctions that most people would miss, and his marks help a crowded trade remain understandable. By midday, the work has changed from first inspection to steady sorting, and we stay close as the Memphis cotton classer begins making lots from many separate bales. A lot is a group, and grouping is a delicate art when the goods are cotton. Buyers often want bales that match closely enough to behave well together. A mill does not want surprises hidden inside a shipment. So the classer's codes help decide which bales sit beside which others in trade. Middling cotton of a certain staple length may be grouped with its near companions, while an odd bale waits apart. You can picture the sample table as a quiet sorting ground. Small tufts lie in order, with tickets tucked beside them. The classer compares one to another, not only against a standard, but against the needs of the lot. He looks for sameness without pretending that nature makes perfect copies. Cotton from different farms, fields, pickings, and ginnings must be gathered into practical company. The codes make that company possible. The sensory work remains simple and exact. Lift the sample, loosen it, look across the face of it. Draw the fibers gently, feel for length and strength. Notice leaf, notice color. Notice whether the preparation is smooth or rough. Then mark what must be marked. Repeat. The repetition is soft enough for sleep, yet deep enough to hold a whole economy in its patient hands. Some bales are easy to place, their cotton is clear in character, and the code almost seems to arrive by itself. Others take more time. A sample may have good staple but dull color. Another may be clean but shorter than expected. Another may show uneven preparation, as if the gin or handling left the fibers less open than they should be. The classer keeps these contradictions calmly in mind. The odd codes do not remove judgment, they shape it. They give judgment a narrow doorway, so it can pass from the classer's mind into the office record. Without the code, each bale would need a fresh description every time someone asked about it. With the code, the room can breathe. People can move. The day can proceed without losing its carefulness. In 1920s Memphis, this mattered because cotton moved in volume. Warehouses held more bales than any one person could study at once. Brokers and buyers needed a way to compare quickly. Railroad cars and river shipments needed paperwork that matched the goods. A code could travel where a sample could not, or at least travel ahead of it, preparing minds before hands touched fiber again. The lot sheet may show a row of bale numbers, each with grade and staple marks. It looks plain, almost dull to someone passing by. But to the people in the room, it is a living arrangement. It says these bales belong together. It says this group can be offered in a certain way. It says the cotton has been seen, named, and fitted into the day's work. You notice how often the body uses small movements. The classer leans forward. The clerk turns a page. A sample is lifted, laid down, and lifted again. A pencil is sharpened with a pocket knife. A sleeve brushes cotton lint from the table edge. These gestures fill the hours. They are not wasted motions. They are the tiny hinges on which the larger routine swings. The warehouse air still waits behind the office, heavy with burlap and compressed fiber. If we step there again, we hear deeper sounds. A bale dragged slightly across boards. A truck backing near a door. Men calling numbers in voices made flat by repetition. The tags hang where they should. The marks must agree. The code on paper must connect with the bale in the row, or the whole calm pattern begins to fray. So the office checks itself. Numbers are read back. Samples are matched. Lots are reviewed. A classer may look again at a doubtful sample, not because he distrusts the day, but because checking is part of the day. The quietest industries often survive by such checking. Nothing theatrical happens. Someone simply looks again, and that second look prevents trouble later. There is comfort in the fact that the code is not trying to be poetry, it is trying to be useful. Still, it has its own spare beauty. SM for strict middling, M for middling, LM for low middling, a note for staple, a mark for condition. These compact signs hold a careful human act, like a label on a drawer in an old workshop where every tool has been placed by long experience. Sometimes a buyer comes in and handles a sample for himself. He may stand beside the classer, turning the cotton in the light, asking a mild question about the grade or staple. The classer answers without hurry. Their language is practical but not cold. Both men know the cotton has weather inside it, field history inside it, and the labor of many hands folded into its softness. There may be disagreement, because cotton grading lives close to judgment. But the standards, the codes, and the habits of the Memphis trade help keep disagreement within bounds. A grade can be appealed, a sample can be compared, a lot can be adjusted. The point is not to defeat someone in argument. The point is to make the cotton understandable enough to move fairly. By afternoon, light changes color in the room. It becomes flatter, warmer, dustier. The high window glass shows smudges. The fan keeps turning. The table holds fewer morning samples and more afternoon decisions. You may feel the classer's shoulders settle into the last long stretch of work. The day is not finished, but it has passed its busiest crest. The codes continue to appear, one after another, quiet as thread. Each one belongs to a bale, and each bale belongs to a season. Some cotton was picked clean in dry weather. Some came through rain. Some was ginned carefully. Some carried leaf from hurried work. The classer does not scold the cotton for being what it is. He simply names it as clearly as he can. There is a gentle fairness in that naming. Not every bale can be high grade. Not every sample can be bright, clean, long, and smooth. But each bale can be looked at honestly. Each can be placed where it fits. The cotton classer's code does not make the fiber better or worse. It makes the judgment visible, so others can act with less confusion. When the afternoon light settles lower, we follow the Memphis cotton classer into the quieter habit of rechecking, filing, and preparing the day's codes for movement beyond the room. The last part of the work can feel almost domestic, like putting a kitchen in order after a meal. Samples must be tied, stored, returned, or kept for reference. Tickets must be gathered. Ledgers must be closed only after their lines have been checked. The table is brushed free of loose lint, though some fibers always remain. Cotton is like that. It leaves a little of itself wherever it has rested. A clerk may read entries aloud in a low voice while another follows the page. Bale number, grade, staple, lot. Bale number, grade, staple, lot. The repetition is not dramatic. It is soothing in its plainness. You can hear how the room relies on it, how a careful spoken check catches what the eye alone might miss after hours of looking at lines. The codes now become messages. Some may go to buyers. Some may be copied for warehouse records. Some may be used in sales contracts or shipping papers. Some may travel by telegraph in shortened form because commercial messages reward brevity. A long description costs time and money. A code can cross distance with less weight, carrying Memphis cotton into the minds of people who are not standing in the room. The telegraph office, if we imagine it nearby, has a different texture. It has clicking sound, brass keys, paper forms, and the faint metallic smell of equipment warmed by use. A cotton message may sit among other business messages, each reduced to necessary words. The classer's mark, born from soft fiber, becomes hard signal for a moment, tapped through wire, and received elsewhere as trade language. That is one of the quiet wonders of this job. The cotton begins in fields, becomes sample, becomes grade, becomes code, becomes ledger, becomes message, and then becomes action somewhere else. At each stage, someone handles it differently. The farmer knows its growth, the gin knows its separation, the classer knows its character, the clerk knows its record, the buyer knows its use. The code connects them without calling attention to itself. You may find that soothing, the way a small system can hold together when each person tends his part. The Memphis cotton classer does not need to see the whole journey to serve it well. His table is enough. His standards are enough. His fingers and eyes are enough for the work appointed to him. The rest moves outward, carried by paper, rail, river, and habit. As the day slows, the samples have a tired look. Though cotton itself does not tire, perhaps it is the people around them who have spent their attention. The white and cream tufts lie flatter now, the paper wrappers are creased, the pencil points have dulled. The wastebasket holds scraps, old ties and bits of lint that missed the table. The office smells of work that has been done. A classer may clean his hands with a cloth, but the cotton dust remains faintly in the nails. He may close a cabinet of standards with care, because those samples must be protected for tomorrow. He may place a ruler or staple guide back where it belongs. He may look once more at a doubtful ticket, then let it rest. The day's decisions have become records. There is no ceremony in this closing. The chairs are pushed in, the ledger cover falls shut, the ink is capped, a window is lowered if rain threatens, or left open a little if the evening is warm. Outside, Memphis carries on with streetcars, footsteps, wagons, engines, and voices drifting through the cotton district. Inside, the room begins to release its heat. The classes' codes will outlast the day in a modest way. They will sit in files and on forms. They will guide buyers and shipments. They may be questioned, confirmed, copied, and forgotten. Most of them will never be remembered by name, because their purpose is to work and then disappear into the larger movement of cotton. Many useful things are like that. They do not ask to be noticed. You can imagine walking home with the classer after such a day. His eyes may feel strained from pale fiber and close comparison. His hands may remember the pull of staple length. His shirt may hold the dry scent of cotton lint. The city evening may feel broad after the office, with river air moving through streets and lamps beginning to show at windows. At home, ordinary life receives him. Supper, a chair, a newspaper, a porch if the weather allows. Perhaps he does not speak much about the difference between middling and strict middling, because some kinds of knowledge belong mostly to the workplace. Yet the quiet skill remains in him. Tomorrow he will see again what others pass over, and the codes will begin again. And as evening gathers over the Memphis cotton district, we let the day's small marks lead us backward into the older routines that made such classing necessary. Before the cotton reaches the classer, it has already passed through many calm and tiring stages. In the field, cotton opens in bolls, soft against rougher stems and leaves. Picking is handwork in much of the 1920s South, slow and repetitive, with sacks dragging along rows and fingers learning to pull lint free without taking too much burr or leaf. The classer later sees traces of this field life in the sample. You can feel how a dry picking day might leave cotton brighter and cleaner. You can feel how rain can dull it, how wind can carry dust, how late season weather can change color. These are not abstract facts to the classer. They show up under his hand. A bale does not arrive as an empty commodity. It arrives carrying weather, timing, tools, soil, and human pace. At the gin, seed cotton is cleaned, pulled, and separated. The sound there is much louder than the classing room, full of belts, saws, suction, wood, metal, and men working around machinery, yet the gin's work becomes quiet in the sample later. Good preparation may leave lint open and even. Poorer preparation may leave it rough, tangled, or mixed with more trash. The classer reads the machine's touch after the noise is gone. The bale itself is made by pressure. Loose lint becomes a compressed block, wrapped in bagging and held with ties. It is practical, heavy, and made for movement. A bale can be rolled, hauled, stacked, weighed, sampled, and shipped, but inside that pressed form is still a mass of delicate fibers, each one small enough to cling to your sleeve. Cotton is both strong in bulk and tender in detail. This contrast is part of what makes the classes work so absorbing. He deals with large trade through tiny evidence. A handful of lint stands for a bale. A bale stands for labor and land. A code stands for the handful. The chain is simple only after many people have agreed to trust it. In Memphis, that trust is built each day across tables, ledgers, and warehouse floors. The codes also helped because cotton markets needed speed without abandoning inspection. A buyer could not personally examine every bale in every warehouse before every decision. Yet blind buying would invite mistakes. The class's code sits between those extremes. It offers trained judgment in a compact form. It lets trade move while still honoring the physical nature of the goods. You may hear the old terms again, and now they carry more weight. Middling is not merely middle in a vague sense. It is a standard point, a reference in the grading language. Strict middling sits above it. Low middling sits below it. Around those names are finer distinctions, color descriptions, staple measures, and condition notes. The code is small because the shared background is large. A young classer learns slowly. He watches older men handle samples. He studies standards until the grades settle into his eye. He makes mistakes quietly and corrects them. He learns not to be fooled by a bright face if the staple is short, or by a clean look if the fiber lacks strength. He learns that cotton can look one way at first glance and another way after the hand opens it. That learning has a workshop feeling. It is apprenticeship through repetition. No lecture can fully replace the table. The eye needs many mornings, the fingers need many samples. The mind needs many comparisons until the code becomes natural, not casual, but natural. You can imagine the first time a young classer writes a grade and an older man nods without changing it. That small nod may be enough. In the 1920s, when standards and trade systems were becoming more orderly, such training mattered. A Memphis cotton classer stood in a city where old habits and newer rules met. Local experience still counted. Official grades counted too. Exchange practices, warehouse receipts, and national standards all pressed toward clearer language. The odd little codes were part of that clearing, like labels added to shelves in a busy room. The work also required restraint. A classer should not favor the seller because he knows him, or the buyer because he is persuasive. He should not let a hurried room hurry his eyes. He should not let one very good quality hide another weakness. The code should be as fair as the sample allows. That fairness is quiet, but it matters. Many people depend on it without seeing it. And now, as the older path from field to office settles behind us, we return to the table where the Memphis cotton classer handles one more sample in the amber light of late day. This sample is not special at first glance. It is a pale, loose piece of cotton folded into paper, tied to a number, waiting with the patience of all ordinary things. The classer opens it and lets it breathe. A little lint rises. He smooths it gently. The cotton catches light along its uneven surface, bright in some places, duller in others, with tiny leaf specks scattered like ground pepper. You stand beside him, close enough to see the motion of his thumb. He lifts a portion and pulls. The fibers draw out into a thin beard, soft and resistant at once. He looks along their length. He feels how they hold. He compares what he sees to what he has seen all day, and to what he has learned over years of similar days. The room is quiet enough for this kind of looking, yet it contains the whole slow act. It contains the light from the window, the feel of the fiber, the memory of standards, the judgment about grade, the estimate of staple, and the clerk waiting with pen ready. It contains, in its small way, the weather of fields and the needs of distant mills. Then it becomes a line in the ledger. This is why the old codes quietly worked. They were not clever for the sake of being clever. They were fitted to the routine, they were short enough for a busy office, exact enough for trained readers, and humble enough to sit inside a day's work without drawing attention. You might pass over them in an archive and think they were only marks. But in the cotton room, they made the work move. The final checks begin. Samples are gathered into proper order. The table clears by degrees. The classer brushes loose cotton into his palm and drops it aside. The clerk sands or blots the last wet ink. A warehouseman comes in for a paper, receives it, and leaves with a soft step and a creak of the door. The day has not ended suddenly. It has thinned. Outside, the Memphis evening grows deeper. The river is not far, whether seen or only felt in the dampness that returns after heat. The cotton district carries its own dusk, with warehouse walls holding the last light, and street sounds loosening into evening. A few lamps appear. A wagon wheel knocks over a rough place in the road. Somewhere, a train sound stretches and fades. Inside, the standards are closed away, the ledgers are stacked. The tickets rest where tomorrow's hands can find them. The cotton classer's chair stands slightly back from the table, as if the room itself has taken a breath. Lint still clings to the wood grain. It will be there in the morning, pale and soft, waiting for the next sample, the next code, the next careful look. The work leaves no loud monument. It leaves records, shipments, cloth, and habits. It leaves the memory of men who could read color in a handful of fiber and who could turn that reading into marks useful to others. It leaves the quiet thought that many systems are held together by people doing small tasks well, again and again, without needing the day to praise them. And so we remain a little longer in the cooling room, where the cotton has been named, the codes have done their modest work, and the table waits in the soft dust of Memphis evening. The room does not become empty all at once. It loosens, little by little, as each task finds its resting place, and each paper settles into the stack where it belongs. You can still smell cotton in the boards, warm from the day, and ink in the soft darkness around the clerk's desk. The Memphis cotton classer has finished the visible judging for now, but the codes remain awake in the ledgers, holding their little meanings while the building grows still around them. If you linger near the table, you begin to notice how much of the day is left behind in small traces. A short fiber clings to the edge of a ruler. A pale tuft rests near the inkwell. The blotter carries faint reversed marks from another page, ghostly and unreadable unless you lean close. Even the chair seems to remember the classer's weight, the forward tilt of his body, the patient reach of his hand toward the next sample. In a Memphis cotton office of the 1920s, the end of the day is never only an ending. It is preparation for another morning, because bales do not stop arriving just because a lamp is turned low. Warehouse doors will open again, tags will be checked again, samples will be untied and spread in the light again. The codes that quietly work today will be asked to work tomorrow with the same plain patience. The clerk may leave a list ready for the first hour of the next day. It might show lots still waiting, samples held for review, or bales that need a second look because their first code did not sit quite easily. You can imagine him tapping the papers into line, not hurried, just tidy. Order is a kind of rest in such a room. When the papers lie straight, the mind can loosen its grip. Outside, Memphis carries its evening air over streets that have known cotton wagons, drays, streetcars, brokers, warehouse hands, and visitors who came to the city because cotton pulled them there. The Mississippi moves nearby in its own dark way, broad and indifferent to the marks inside the office. Yet the river and the codes belong to the same world. One carries goods by force of water, the other carries meaning by force of agreement. The oddness of those cotton classer codes is gentler when you think of them this way. They were not secret for secrecy's sake. They were small tools, like a narrow key for a certain cabinet. If you had not worked in the trade, the letters might seem cramped and strange. If you had learned the work, they opened neatly. A few marks could tell you what kind of cotton waited behind the paper. And when the lamp is lowered, we follow those marks into the quiet memory of how a classer learned to read them in the first place. No one becomes a good cotton classer by simply memorizing words. The terms matter, of course, and the codes matter, but the real learning settles deeper than the vocabulary. It enters the eyes, the hands, and the small inward patience that keeps a person looking after the first impression has already spoken. In 1920s Memphis, a young classer learned beside older men, in rooms where cotton dust softened the light and every sample became a lesson. The first lessons were probably humble. Hold the cotton this way, do not crush it. Open it gently. Let the fibers show themselves before you decide. Look at the color in steady light, not in a shadow. Compare it with the standard. Feel the staple, but do not let your fingers hurry. You can almost hear the older voice, low and matter-of-fact, giving advice that sounds simple only after years have proved it true. A young man might begin by watching. He sees the older classer lift sample after sample, and at first they all look much alike. Cream, white, dull white, specked, leafy smooth, rough. The differences blur. But then, after days and weeks, one sample begins to stand apart from another. A bright cotton looks truly bright. A tinged cotton shows its warm cast. Leaf stops being mere dirt and becomes a measure that can be weighed by eye. The codes arrive slowly into that learning. At first, they are letters on paper, perhaps recited like little trade fragments. M for middling, SM for strict middling, LM for low middling, GO for good ordinary, if the office uses that older term in its proper place. The young learner copies them, speaks them, hears them in the room, and gradually attaches them not to definitions alone, but to the feel and sight of real cotton. The body remembers what the mind repeats. After a while, the fingers begin to know when fibers are shorter than the sample first seemed. The eye begins to notice when color is not quite clean enough for the grade one might wish it to be. The mind begins to hold several qualities at once, instead of being captured by the strongest one. That is when classing starts to become more than naming. There is a quiet discipline in not wanting the cotton to be better than it is. A seller might hope for a higher mark. A buyer might prefer a lower one. The classer must let those hopes pass by like street noise outside the window. He stands with the cotton itself. The code is his answer to the sample, not to the room's wishes. That kind of steadiness takes practice, and practice takes many ordinary days. You can imagine a small shelf of worn reference samples, protected from rough handling but still used often enough to feel familiar. A young classer studies them in morning light, then again under afternoon light, learning how the same cotton can shift slightly with the room. He learns to turn toward the window, to avoid glare, to distrust poor lamps, and to keep his standards clean. Good judgment needs good conditions, even when the work feels old and practical. In Memphis, the trade brought in enough cotton to teach a person thoroughly. Samples from river bottoms, hill farms, delta lands, and different gins passed across the same tables. Some years were bright, some were damp. Some crops were full of leaf because weather made picking difficult. Some offered lovely staple in clean preparation. The young class's education was not a single book. It was a season, then another season, and another. The codes quietly worked because this long apprenticeship stood behind them. A letter in a ledger was not merely a clerk's mark, it was the visible end of training, comparison, correction, and memory. When someone in the Memphis cotton trade read that mark, he trusted not only the symbol, but the kind of person and practice that had put it there. The code was small, because the work behind it was not. And as the memory of apprenticeship settles into the room, we move back to the standards themselves, those quiet cotton samples that gave the codes their shared meaning. Standards are a calm idea, but they come from a lively need. Before people can trade cotton fairly across distance, they need to know that the words mean the same thing in more than one room. Middling in one city should not drift too far from middling in another. Strict middling should have a recognizable place. Low middling should not depend only on local habit. In the 1920s, this shared language mattered greatly in Memphis. The physical standards had a special presence. They were not merely printed descriptions, though descriptions helped. They were actual, prepared samples, carefully chosen and preserved, showing what a grade should look like. You can picture a classer opening a standard box with clean hands and a slower motion than usual. The cotton inside is both ordinary and almost ceremonial, because it helps many people agree without needing a long debate every morning. A standard sample has to be protected from dust, handling, sunlight, and time. Cotton can change. It can fade, darken, collect dirt, or lose the exact freshness that made it useful. So the standard is handled with respect, not affection exactly, but a practical tenderness. The lid closes when the comparison is done. The sample returns to its place. The code written afterward depends partly on that careful keeping. When the Memphis cotton classer compares a new sample to a standard, he is joining his local day to a wider system. The office may smell of river damp and old pine floors, But the standard carries an agreement that stretches beyond the city. Buyers in other markets, mills in other states, and officials who have studied grading all belong faintly in that comparison. The little code on the ticket is local and national at once. Still, the work remains physical. The classer does not stare at the standard like a museum piece. He uses it. He places the sample near it. He watches how color differs, how leaf appears, how the cotton surface reads under the same light. His hand may hover, then separate fibers again. He knows that standards guide judgment, but they do not remove the need for judgment. Cotton keeps its own variety. The official language can sound exact, yet the actual work has a soft edge. One sample may sit close to a boundary. Another may have color that suggests one grade and leaf that suggests another. The classer must weigh the whole impression. This is why a code can feel both precise and human. It gives a settled answer, but the road to that answer may pass through careful, almost wordless thought. You might hear a drawer slide open as the standard is returned. Wood against wood makes a dry, friendly sound. The classer's fingers close the drawer slowly, because dust and haste are not welcome there. The room returns to its ordinary level. The clerk waits. The ticket waits. The new sample waits for its mark, and the classer writes what the comparison has made clear enough. The codes for staple length have their own standards of touch and sight. Length cannot be understood by color. It asks for pulling, aligning, and seeing how far the fibers run. The classer draws a small portion into a tuft and lets the longer fibers show themselves. The measure may be written in simple form, but the hand has done something subtle. It has found an average in a little cloud of unequal hairs. Staple matters because cotton must become yarn, and yarn is patient only with fibers that suit the machinery and the cloth being made. A mill buyer cares about this, even when standing far from the field. The Memphis code for staple helps him imagine how the bale might behave. It tells him, in shorthand, whether the cotton belongs in one kind of spinning or another. The classer's fingers speak to machines he may never hear. The room grows quiet around such thoughts, not because anyone has stopped working, but because repetition can make thoughts slow and broad. You begin with a sample in the hand, you end with mills, trains, standards, markets, and cloth. Then you return to the hand again, because the hand is where the judgment enters the world. That return keeps the work from becoming abstract. The cotton is always there. And as we leave the standard drawer closed and ready for tomorrow, the day opens again toward the warehouse, where the codes are tested against rows of waiting bales. The warehouse has its own atmosphere, wider and rougher than the office, but still part of the same quiet system. The air is thick with jute bagging, dust, cotton, wood, and sometimes the faint iron smell of ties and tools. Light comes in from high openings and wide doors, falling across stacked bales in pale blocks. The Memphis cotton classer may spend less time here than at the table, yet every code he writes must belong to this room too. Bales stand close together, marked and numbered, each one wrapped in coarse material that feels very different from the fiber inside. The bagging scratches the hand, the ties are hard. The bale has weight and bluntness. It looks almost stubborn, yet a small opening, a pulled sample, or a loosened place reveals the soft lint within, and the contrast is always striking. Cotton is hidden tenderness under practical covering. A warehouseman may use a hook with skill, not carelessness. The hook catches bagging, helps shift weight, and saves the body where it can. Boots scuff against boards. A truck rolls slowly. Someone reads a number from a tag, and another man checks it against a paper. The sounds are low and repetitive. They do not disturb the sleepiness of the scene. They place you deeper inside the working day. The classer's code must tie the sample back to the bale without confusion. This sounds simple until you see how many bales can fill a warehouse. Rows, stacks, marks, receipts, lots, and destinations all crowd together. A misplaced tag could undo careful work. So the people here learn to move methodically. The code on paper, the number on the bale, and the sample on the table must form one little chain. In 1920s, Memphis warehouse receipts could stand for cotton stored and ready for trade. A bale might be bought, sold, pledged, moved, or held, while its physical body remained in storage until instructions changed. The quality code helped that paper life make sense. It assured the people handling contracts and accounts that the cotton behind the receipt had been classed, not merely counted. The warehouse also reminds us that cotton is not weightless, even if the sample feels light as breath. Men strain around bales. Floors bear load, scales measure. Compressors make bales tighter for shipping. Rail cars wait. River traffic waits. The class's soft work stands beside harder labor, and neither is complete without the other. A code needs a bale. A bale needs a code if it is to move clearly through trade. You might stand near a row of bales and feel the air cooler in the shaded aisle. Dust motes drift slowly. The bagging has frayed places where pale lint pushes through, like a small cloud trying to escape. Chalk marks or tags show information in a rougher language than the ledger, but they all belong to the same order. The bale is not anonymous. It has been given a place in the system. Sometimes a bale may need resampling. Perhaps a buyer questions the first mark, or a lot does not seem even, or a sample has been lost or damaged. The act is not dramatic. Someone locates the bale. Someone draws cotton. The classer looks again. The code may remain the same, or it may shift slightly if the evidence requires it. The value is not in being stubborn. The value is in being accurate. Warehouse light can be less kind than office light, so the classer prefers the table when he can. In shadow, color may flatten. Near a bright doorway, glare may deceive. A good classer knows the limits of each place. He does not pretend that all seeing is equal. The cotton deserves a fair look, and the code deserves conditions that do not bend it. This is practical wisdom, learned without fuss. The warehousemen know which classes are careful. They notice who checks tickets, who keeps samples straight, who can be trusted not to make a quick mark, just to clear a pile. Respect in such places is often quiet. It may be no more than a nod, a paper handed over without question, or a man making room at the table because he knows the work matters. The code carries some of that respect with it, and as the warehouse settles behind us, we follow the coded ticket outward into the rooms where cotton was priced, bargained over, and sent on its way. A cotton broker's room has a different kind of hush. It is not silent, but the quiet is made of calculation, waiting, and short conversations. Desks hold papers, market quotations, sample bundles, letters, and telegram forms. Men may stand with hats in hand or lean over a desk to examine a sample. The Memphis cotton classes codes appear here as part of the practical language of buying and selling. Price is not only a number floating by itself. It is tied to grade, staple, supply-demand, freight, timing, and trust. A bale marked middling with a certain staple does not enter the market in the same way as cotton of a lower grade or shorter fiber. The code helps the broker know what is being offered. It lets conversation begin from a shared point rather than from uncertainty. You can hear the soft rustle of sample papers in the broker's room. Cotton is opened, glanced at, handled, folded again. Someone checks a code against the sample. Someone compares a lot sheet with market news. A telephone may ring with a sharpness that feels brief, then the room returns to its lower register. Even commerce, when repeated daily, can develop a murmuring rhythm. The odd codes quietly work because they allowed many people to move quickly without losing contact with the physical cotton. A buyer might say he needs a certain grade and staple, and the broker can search through coded lots rather than unfolding every stored bale. Yet the sample is still there if needed. The code narrows the field. The hand confirms the choice. Memphis in the 1920s was tied to national and international cotton flows, though the class's room remained local in its textures. Cotton marked in a Memphis ledger might eventually feed looms far away, becoming shirting, sheeting, work cloth, or other woven goods. The classer may never know the final cloth. He knows only that the fiber is suitable or not, clean enough or not, long enough or not. Bargaining can have tension, but we keep our attention on its quieter parts. The pause before a reply, the turning of a sample under better light, the pencil note made in a margin, the way a man taps ash from a cigarette, then reconsiders a lot. The codes do not end negotiation, but they make it less cloudy. They put shared facts on the table, and shared facts are restful in a busy trade. There is a tenderness, almost hidden in the way cotton is handled during business. Men may speak of price, shipment, and lots, but their fingers still open the lint carefully. They know rough handling can spoil the view. They know a sample must be preserved well enough to speak for its bale. So even in commerce, the fiber receives a certain care. Practical care is still care. Sometimes, a code may be marked on a small card attached to a sample. Sometimes it appears in a ledger or on a typed list. Sometimes it is spoken across a desk and written down by another person. Each transfer invites error, so the routine includes repetition. Read it back, check the Bale number, compare the lot. Make sure strict middling did not become middling by a tired hand. The calm of the system depends on these small returns. The Memphis cotton class's authority is quiet in such rooms. He may not be the loudest person in the trade, and he may not make the sale, but his mark gives shape to what is being sold. His work stands underneath the conversation like the table under the papers. Without it, the buyer and seller would have to spend far more time proving what lay inside the bales. A buyer accustomed to the trade can read the code almost at a glance. The letters do not slow him. They are as familiar as street names in his own city. Yet that ease is the result of repetition shared across many offices. When a system works well, people stop noticing its cleverness. They simply use it, and the day becomes smoother because of it. And as the business rooms turn the class's marks into offers and shipments, we return again to the quieter human habits that filled the spaces between decisions. A long day in a cotton office contains more waiting than an outsider might expect. Waiting for samples to arrive, waiting for a warehouse man to locate a bale, waiting for a buyer to come back from another office, waiting for a telegram reply. The classer does not spend every minute in active judgment, yet even waiting has a texture. It smells of paper, dust, cooling coffee, and the faint sweetness of cotton warmed by sun. During such pauses, a man may clean his tools. He may sharpen pencils, straighten tickets, check a drawer, or compare a troublesome sample again because time has opened a little pocket for care. You sit with him in that pocket. The room's sounds grow more distinct. A fly taps at the window. A chair creaks. Far away, a warehouse door slides on its track. Nothing urgent happens, and the work remains present. The classer may have personal habits known to everyone in the office. Perhaps he folds sample paper in a particular way. Perhaps he keeps his pencil behind the same ear. Perhaps he rubs cotton between thumb and forefinger before looking, while another man looks before touching. Workplaces are built from such habits. They make the room human, and they give the codes a lived-in feeling. The codes themselves may have local pronunciation, spoken in clipped but gentle trade language. Strict low middling might be shortened in conversation. Staple lengths might be spoken as if everyone already knew the range. A newcomer could feel lost at first, but after time, the shorthand becomes homely. You hear it and know where you are. You are in Memphis, in the Cotton District, among people who have said these terms all their working lives. There is also the matter of light, which matters more than many office visitors would notice. Morning light from one side of the room may make cotton look clearer. Afternoon glare may warm the color. Cloud cover can soften contrast. A good classer chooses his place carefully, moving a sample if needed. The code should not be a servant of bad light. It should be a servant of the cotton itself. Hands matter too. Clean hands. Dry hands. Hands not stained with ink before touching a pale sample. The cotton will pick up what it can. A classer learns not to mix his tasks thoughtlessly. He handles ink and paper, then cotton, then paper again, with small protections. A cloth, a pause, a habit of where things are placed. These details are ordinary enough to disappear, but they keep the work clean. The office may keep a broom nearby for lint and dust, though sweeping cotton dust is a temporary victory. Fibers drift. They gather under table legs and along baseboards. They cling to ledgers and cuffs. In the late afternoon, if sun enters at an angle, the room looks filled with floating threads. You breathe quietly and notice how the whole place seems made of soft remnants of what it judges. The Memphis cotton classer lives in that softness, but he also lives in rules. This combination gives the job its calm character. The The fiber is loose, variable, and touched by weather. The code is tidy, compact, and agreed upon. Between them stands the classer, making a bridge each time he writes a mark, softness on one side, order on the other. The day moves across that bridge again and again. A person doing this work might develop an inward pace, not slow from laziness, not quick from pressure, but steady, because steadiness produces better seeing. You cannot bully cotton into revealing its grade. You cannot rush your fingers into measuring staple well. You give the sample a few breaths. You let your eye settle. Then the code comes, plain and useful. And when the pauses pass, and the next bundle of samples arrives, the room returns to motion with the same low patience. A bundle may arrive tied with string, carrying several samples folded in paper and marked with Bale numbers. The string leaves a slight dent in the stack. When it is loosened, the papers fan out and the smell of cotton rises again. The clerk checks the accompanying list. The classer places the first sample before him. We begin once more with a handful of fiber, as if the day has quietly turned back to morning. This is one reason the routine is good for sleep. It repeats without becoming empty. Each sample follows the same path, but each sample has its own small character. The listener can rest in the pattern while the details drift gently by. A brighter edge of lint, a rougher preparation, a faint grey cast, a code written in pencil, a page turned, a breath taken. The classer may arrange samples from a lot in a row so he can compare them together. The table becomes a pale landscape, uneven and soft, with each sample a little mound of weathered fiber. He looks across them the way someone might look across folded cloth, seeking harmony. Too much difference in one bale can trouble the lot. The code helps identify the outlier without harshness. Its color is duller, its leaf is heavier, its staple is shorter. Sometimes it is only slightly wrong for the company it keeps, and the classer must decide whether it still belongs. Such decisions are not dramatic, but they require care. A lot that looks even on paper should feel even in use. The code is part of keeping their promise. The clerk's pen follows the classer's decisions. There is a rhythm between them. The classer speaks, the clerk writes. The classer confirms. Paper absorbs the answer. If you listen half asleep, the exchange becomes almost like breathing. Say, write, check, move on. Say, write, check, move on. The room knows this cadence, and the people inside it rely on it. Yet the classer is not merely filling blanks. He is preserving differences that matter. One cotton may be suited for ordinary cloth, another for finer spinning, another for a buyer willing to accept more leaf at a lower price. The code does not praise or blame. It directs. It says, this is what this cotton is, as nearly as trained hands can tell. That plainness is part of its grace. You can feel how old working systems carry calm when they are understood. The tools are simple. The table is familiar. The terms have been spoken many times. The surprises are small and manageable. A sample may be difficult, but not strange. A mark may need thought, but not panic. The classer stands inside a craft whose edges have been worn smooth by daily use. In 1920s Memphis, the cotton trade could be vast, but the classer's immediate world stayed close. A window, a table, a drawer of standards, a ledger, a stack of samples, a few men who knew the work. The great movement of cotton narrowed into these objects, and perhaps that is why the job feels so intimate now. We can stand beside it and understand the day through the hand. There is a kind of evening inside even the afternoon work, a dimming of effort after many repetitions. The classer still sees clearly, but he has spent some of his freshness. He may stand, stretch his back, and look toward the warehouse door. A line of light lies across the floorboards. Cotton lint gathers in that light. The next sample waits, and waiting is part of the work too. And as the day continues through these repeated handfuls of cotton, we turn gently toward the codes for condition, those small notes that told when something about a bale needed extra care. Not every quality fits neatly into grade and staple. Cotton can be damp, it can be mixed, it can be rough in preparation. It can carry sand, motes, leaf, or uneven color in a way that needs mentioning. A class's code or note may need to warn the office that a bale is not simply one clean category. This is where the shorthand becomes more like a soft margin voice, adding what the main mark cannot hold. Dampness is a practical concern, and it has a smell. Not always strong, but present. A closed, earthy odor different from dry cotton warmed by the room. Damp cotton may feel heavier or less lively in the hand. It can affect storage and value. The classer does not need to make the matter dramatic. He only needs to notice it and mark it, so others know what care the bale requires. Mixed cotton is another quiet complication. A sample may show fibers that do not seem to belong together, perhaps from different pickings, fields, or qualities brought into one bale. The surface can look uneven. The pull may feel inconsistent. The code must help prevent such cotton from being mistaken for a uniform lot. In a trade that depends on matching, mixture is worth a careful note. Preparation can be seen in the openness and arrangement of the lint. Well-prepared cotton may look smoother and more even, with fibers lying in a way that pleases the eye. Rough preparation can make the sample seem tangled or ragged. The classer reads this not as a moral fault, but as a clue to how the cotton has passed through gin and handling. The code keeps that clue from being lost. Leaf and trash carry their own small visual language. Tiny, dark pieces lie among the pale fibers, sometimes few, sometimes scattered thickly. They may be sharp-edged or dusty, brown or black, depending on what the cotton has carried from field and processing. You can see why a classer needs patience here. He must judge not one speck, but the whole presence of foreign matter across the sample. The odd codes quietly worked because they could make room for these extra facts. A buyer reading the main grade might still need to know if the cotton had a condition that changed its desirability. A warehouse might need to handle a damp bale differently. A broker might avoid grouping a rough bale with smoother cotton. The code and note together preserve the individuality of the bale without long explanation. There is something kind in accurate caution. It prevents disappointment later. It tells the truth early when the matter can still be handled well. The Memphis cotton classes marks were not only instruments of price, they were tools of expectation. They helped people avoid pretending that all bales in a grade were identical. Cotton, like people, keeps its small differences even inside common names. The classer may pause over a condition note longer than over an ordinary grade. The main mark comes from familiar comparison, but a condition asks whether the ordinary code is enough. He looks again. He feels the sample again. He may ask for another portion from the bale. The room waits, because waiting now may save confusion later. Then he writes the note, and the bale's record becomes a little more truthful. The clerk copies such notes carefully. A smudged or omitted word could matter. The handwriting must be clear, especially where the code steps outside the most common marks. In the warm office, with afternoon dust in the air, this is the kind of concentration that looks small from a distance and large from within. The line must say what the classer meant. Nothing more, nothing less. You can hear the soft fatigue in the room, and yet the work continues to hold its shape. That is one of the most soothing features of old routine labor. The people may be tired, but the routine helps carry them. The steps are known, the tools are near. The next action is not mysterious. Lift the sample, check the ticket, make the comparison, write the code, keep the chain intact. And as condition marks settle into the ledger, we follow the day's records toward the edge of the city, where rail and river waited to carry coded cotton away from Memphis. A shipment begins long before a bale moves. It begins in records, instructions, and decisions about which cotton belongs together and where it should go. The classes codes help assemble those decisions. A mill order may require a certain quality. A buyer may prefer a certain staple. A merchant may have lots ready for delivery. The warehouse must know which bales to pull, and the paperwork must guide the hands. At the rail siding, the air changes. You smell coal smoke, iron, dust, river damp, and the rough odor of freight. Men work around cars with practiced caution, calling numbers and checking lists. The bales are heavy and plain, not at all like the soft samples on the office table. Yet the code written from that softness helps decide why this bale is loaded with that one, and why another waits behind. The river has its own slower presence. Even when shipping by rail dominates a particular movement, Memphis cannot be separated from the Mississippi's broad patience. Warehouses, landings, streets, and trade habits all know the water. Cotton moving out of the city carries something of that river atmosphere with it. The damp evenings, the whistles, the dark current beyond the buildings. The class's code belongs to this landscape too. A bill of lading or shipping instruction may not repeat every detail the classer saw, but it depends on prior records that did. The quality has been named, the lot has been assembled, the buyer has accepted or questioned. The bales are identified. Each step rests on the simple idea that the sample, code, and bale truly correspond. Without that trust, movement becomes doubt, and doubt slows everything. You might imagine a warehouse clerk standing by a car door with a list in hand. He reads numbers in the dimming light. Another man checks the tag. A bale moves. The list receives a pencil mark. The process is physical, but the paper is always present, fluttering slightly in the air from the open car. The cotton trade is muscle and memory, but also handwriting. The classer may not be at the siding, yet his work travels there. Each coded lot carries his earlier attention. His eye is present in the loading order. His hand is present in the grade column. His judgment helps the shipper avoid mixing cotton poorly. This is a quiet extension of a person's labor when something done at a table becomes useful under a different roof or sky. Once cotton leaves Memphis, its code may continue to be read along the way. A buyer, a mill receiver, or another classer might examine the shipment and compare it with the marks. Good codes reduce friction. They do not prevent every dispute, but they make many transactions smoother. A mark that quietly works is one that can leave its maker and still be understood. There is a sleepful comfort in imagining the bales resting in a freight car at night. Their tags are still. Their bagging smells of dust and fiber. Outside, wheels and couplings make small metal sounds. Somewhere in the papers that travel with them, the class's codes sit in ink, carrying the memory of a sunlit table. The cotton is moving, but the mark remains calm. The mill that receives such cotton may be far from the Memphis office, yet the code gives it a first expectation. Workers there will open, blend, clean, card, draw, spin and weave according to the needs of production. The class's code cannot do their work, but it helps send them cotton suited to it. In this way, one quiet job prepares another quiet process, and the chain of labor continues. And as the cotton moves outward in freight cars and paperwork, we come back to the class's room after hours, where stillness gathers around the tools that made the marks. The empty office at night has a different honesty. Without voices, it becomes easier to see the furniture as tools of routine. The long table is not decorative, it is a surface for judgment. The chairs are not arranged for comfort alone. They support bodies that lean, write, compare, and wait. The cabinet is not merely storage, it guards standards that keep language from drifting too far. If you stand there in the darkening room, you may still smell the day. Cotton lint has a dry, soft odor that lingers in wood and paper. Ink cools in its bottle. A metal ruler holds a little of the day's warmth before letting it go. The floorboards creak once as the building settles. Outside, someone passes along the street, and the sound is muffled by the walls. The codes are invisible now unless a ledger is opened, but their presence remains. They have ordered the day. They have turned uncertain samples into recognized qualities. They have helped people speak across distance. They have kept bales from becoming anonymous. In the quiet room, this feels almost tender. A small mark can be a form of care when it helps the right thing happen next. A night watchman might pass through the building later, carrying a lantern or switching on a low electric light, depending on the place and habit of the office. He may not know the full meaning of the class's codes, but he knows the room belongs to cottonwork. He sees the table, the closed drawers, the paper stacks, and the thin lint along the edges. His own routine crosses the class's routine for a moment. The watchman's steps are slow. He checks doors, windows, perhaps the stove or lamps, and then moves on. The cotton samples, if any remain out, rest like pale patches in the dimness, The standards are closed away. The ledgers are quiet. The classer's pencil is where he left it, waiting without impatience. This is how workplaces sleep, not by forgetting the day, but by holding everything still until morning. In the larger city, cotton does not sleep completely. Freight may move, messages may wait. Markets elsewhere may be opening or closing. Weather over distant fields may be changing the next crop before anyone in the office can know it. Yet the Memphis classing room has done what it can for this day. Its codes have been written. Its samples have been handled. Its part of the chain is resting. There is a calm dignity in a room after work. The signs of use remain, but the effort has stopped. You can see where hands were placed, where papers slid, where cotton was opened under the light. You can feel that tomorrow will not require reinvention. The work will begin again from known objects and known gestures. That promise of return is one reason routine can feel so peaceful. And when morning comes again, before the full heat rises, we step once more beside the Memphis cotton classer as he opens the first drawer and lets the codes begin their quiet labor anew. The next morning may start with a softer sky. Perhaps rain has passed in the night, leaving the street damp and the air cooler under the office windows. The smell of cotton seems different when damp air presses against it. It is earthier, closer, more like stored fields than dry paper. The classer notices such things without making them into conversation. Weather affects cotton, and so weather belongs in the room. He removes his coat or keeps it on, depending on the season. Memphis weather can ask for both patience and adaptation. A cool morning may become a warm afternoon. A damp room may dry as the sun comes up. The classer's eyes adjust with the changing light. His hands adjust to the feel of samples that have taken on the morning air. The codes remain the same, but the conditions around them shift gently. The first sample opens with a whisper of paper. The cotton inside is clean enough to brighten the table. He spreads it with 2 fingers, careful not to overwork it. The clerk reads the Bale number. The classer nods. There is a pleasant plainness in beginning again. No ceremony, no speech, only the return of a task that knows its own shape. This sample may be middling, but the classer does not decide too quickly. He compares color, he looks for leaf, he tests the staple. He notices whether the fibers pull evenly or break into a shorter impression. The code comes after the seeing, not before it. Then the mark is written, and the first bale of the day has crossed from softness into record. More samples follow. Some are folded neatly, others less so. Some wrappers carry smudges from warehouse hands, some tickets are crisp, some worn from handling. Each one brings the field and gin into the office in miniature. You can rest in the repetition. Open, look, feel, compare, mark. Open, look, feel, compare, mark. The day's rhythm has no need to announce itself. The classer's mind may hold yesterday's difficult bales, but he must not let them color today's first judgment. This is another quiet discipline. Every sample deserves its own attention. A person in repetitive work learns to carry experience without letting experience become assumption. The codes work best when habit supports seeing rather than replacing it. That balance is delicate, and it is learned through countless mornings. In the 1920s Memphis cotton trade, the pressure for clarity did not remove the old intimacy of handwork. Even with standards, ledgers, exchanges, telephones, telegraphs, and rail systems, the classes still needed to touch cotton. The market could become broad and modern, but quality still passed through fingers. This is one of the soft contradictions of the job, and it gives the work its lasting atmosphere. The office may receive news from outside while the samples continue, prices move, weather reports arrive, a buyer delays. A shipment is expected. Someone mentions a crop condition from a nearby county. These things matter, but the classer cannot let them turn his grade into hope or fear. He returns to the sample. The cotton is what it is under the light. The code must follow that. A young clerk may watch him and begin learning without being formally taught. He sees how long the classer pauses before writing. He sees which samples cause a second comparison. He notices that the experienced man does not handle cotton nervously. The work teaches through atmosphere as much as instruction. In a room like this, patience is contagious when the senior hands practice it well. There are mornings when the codes feel almost automatic, because the cotton is straightforward and the records move easily. There are other mornings when every few samples require thought. The classer does not complain much either way. Work is work. Some days glide, some days catch. The table receives both. The ledger receives both. The cotton district outside continues to send in its bales. And as the new day finds its steady pace, we look more closely at the sample itself. That small representative piece asked to speak for a bale much larger than the hand. A sample is a modest thing, but it carries a serious burden. It must show enough of the bale's character for the classer to judge fairly. If drawn poorly, it can flatter or harm the bale by accident. If kept poorly, it can lose the freshness of its evidence. The Memphis cotton classer depends on the sample, but he also knows its limits. He treats it as a witness, not as a toy. The paper around the sample may be plain and worn, but the act of opening it is careful. You do not scatter the cotton. You do not mix it with another sample. You do not let the ticket drift away from it. The sample and its number belong together like a name and a face. In a room full of pale fiber, such belonging is everything. The classer lifts a portion and turns it slightly. Cotton catches light in layers. The outer surface may look brighter than the inner tuft. Leaf may hide until the sample is opened. A stained patch may appear only after the cotton is spread. The hand makes the sample honest by giving it room to show itself. Then the eye can do its calmer work. There is also the feel of staple. The classer draws fibers gently, forming a little beard between finger and thumb. The motion is small, almost soothing to watch. He aligns, releases, and looks. He is not measuring every fiber like a laboratory worker. He is estimating from trained perception, using standards, memory, and repeated practice. The resulting code may be compact, but the gesture behind it is finely tuned. The sample's smell can tell less than the eye, but it still belongs in the room. Dry cotton smells faint, warm, and dusty. Damp cotton may smell heavier. Cotton carrying smoke, storage must, or field earth may suggest its path before arrival. The classer does not grade by smell alone, but sensory knowledge gathers from many directions. The body learns the workplace as a whole. A sample can be too small, too disturbed, too dirty from handling, or too uneven to trust fully. In such cases, the classer may ask for another draw. This is not a disruption. It is part of fairness. Better to return to the bale than to let a poor sample create a poor code. The routine makes room for correction, which is why it can remain calm under pressure. When the sample is good, it allows the classer to see the bale in miniature. Not perfectly, but enough. That enoughness is central to the whole trade. Most working systems depend on useful approximations, made honestly and checked when needed. The cotton classer's code is one of those approximations, humble and practical. It turns a handful into a decision that others can use. You may find it restful to think of how little the sample asks. It does not explain itself in words. It does not argue. It simply lies in the light, carrying the evidence of field, gin, storage, and weather. The classer's work is to listen with his eyes and hands. The code is the answer he writes after that quiet listening. And as the sample gives up its small truth, we turn toward the people who depended on those marks without ever seeing the long table where they were made. A farmer might never stand in the Memphis classing room, yet the code could touch his income. His cotton, once ginned and baled, entered a trade language that assigned value through grade and staple. He knew the crop by labor first, by days in the field, by the ache of picking, by weather watched from a porch or road. The classer knew it later, in a different form, pale and quiet under office light. The distance between field and classing room could be wide in feeling, even when short on a map. In the field, cotton is seasonal, physical, and uncertain. In the office, cotton becomes comparative, coded, and tradable. Yet the same fiber passes through both worlds. The classer's code does not erase the field. It carries a trace of it forward, translated into the terms the market understands. A gin owner or operator might also care about classing results. Good preparation could be recognized. rough preparation could show itself. The gin's work affected how cotton appeared when opened on the table. The classer was not there to praise or scold the gin, but his codes reflected what the sample revealed. Over time, such judgments could encourage care, because the market noticed what the classer named brokers, depended on the marks because they allowed them to speak confidently. Warehousemen depended on them because lots needed order. Buyers depended on them because mills needed suitable fiber. Clerks depended on them because records needed consistency. The cotton classer did not stand above these people. He stood among them doing one narrow job that helped many wider jobs fit together. This is one of the comforts of obscure work. A role can be small in public memory and still deeply necessary in its own time. Many people may never have thought about a Memphis cotton classer's codes, but the people in the trade felt their usefulness every day. A quiet mark on a ticket could prevent a poor shipment, smooth a sale, or spare an argument. That is enough work for any code. The classer himself may have lived modestly, walking to and from the cotton district, carrying lunch, reading the paper, knowing the price talk of the day, and noticing weather even on days off. Some jobs train attention so deeply that the worker cannot entirely leave them behind. He may see cotton cloth differently. He may touch a shirt sleeve and think, briefly, of staple and yarn. Then, ordinary life resumes. You can imagine his family knowing the smell of cotton dust on him, not strong perhaps, but present in cuffs and coat seams. They may not ask about every grade. They may know only that his work requires good eyes and care. At home, the strange letters of the office give way to household language, but the calm habits of the work may remain in how he folds a paper, sharpens a pencil, or notices light. The codes quietly worked because they were embedded in ordinary lives. They were not floating inventions. They belonged to men and rooms, to fingers stained by ink, to warehouse floors, to ledgers stacked in cabinets, to buyers with sample envelopes in their pockets. They worked because people used them repeatedly until they became second nature. A tool becomes trustworthy when it survives many uneventful days. And as we follow those ordinary lives around the cotton district, the afternoon deepens again, and the classer returns to a question that never quite leaves his table: how much difference is enough difference to change the code? This question sits at the heart of grading. A sample close to middling may still fall just below it. Another may rise just enough to deserve strict middling. The boundary is not a painted line on the cotton. It is a trained judgment made through comparison. The classer must decide when a shade of color, a scatter of leaf, or a difference in staple matters enough to alter the mark. You can see why the work needs calm. If he changes grades too easily, the codes lose steadiness. If he refuses to change when the cotton requires it, the codes lose honesty. Between those mistakes lies the quiet center of the craft. The classer stands there all day, making small decisions that must be firm without becoming rigid. The standards help, but the sample must still be read as a whole. Cotton may be good in one respect and weaker in another. Bright color can draw the eye away from leaf. Good staple can make a person want to forgive dullness. Clean preparation can make a sample seem better at first touch. The classer learns to pause, to let the attractive quality settle down, and then to see the rest. This patience has a physical feel. He may hold the sample lower, then raise it toward the light. He may spread it wider. He may place it beside a standard once more. He may look away for a breath, then look back with fresher eyes. These small acts protect the code from haste. They are the quiet safeguards of the cotton room. Sometimes the difference is in color alone. White cotton may hold a creamy warmth that is acceptable, or a deeper tinge that lowers its standing. Weather stains may appear unevenly. A classer must know whether he is seeing a surface accident or a quality present throughout the sample. He opens the cotton, turns it, and lets the inner fiber speak. The code waits until the question has softened into an answer. Sometimes the difference is in leaf. A few specks may not pull the cotton down as much as a heavier scattering. Larger pieces may trouble the impression more than tiny motes. The classer does not count each speck like coins. He judges the whole presence of trash in relation to the grade. This is why the work is both exact and not mechanical. It requires trained proportion. Staple differences can feel even more subtle to an untrained hand. One tuft may seem only slightly longer than another, but in spinning, slight length can matter. The classer estimates where the average lies. He knows the common staple lengths for cotton arriving in Memphis. He knows what buyers expect. He knows when a sample reaches the next mark and when it falls short. The fingers become a measuring instrument. The code written after such judgment may appear almost too small for the thought it required. Just a few letters, perhaps a staple notation, perhaps a condition note. Yet this is true of many crafts. The visible result is small because the invisible preparation is large. A good seam, a true plane surface, a well-set type line, a properly graded bale. The hand knows what the final mark does not show. In the classing room, there is no need to explain every decision aloud. Explanation appears when needed, but much of the work proceeds in shared understanding. The clerk trusts the classer. The warehouse trusts the office. The buyer may verify, but he begins from the code. Such trust is not sentimental. It is built by accuracy repeated so often that others can plan around it. And as the question of difference settles back into routine, the Memphis cotton classer turns toward another bundle, and the afternoon continues in its patient way. A fresh bundle waits at the table with its string still tied, and the classer loosens it the way a person opens a familiar drawer. The papers spread slightly under his hand. Cotton dust lifts in the light and then seems to hover undecided above the surface of the desk. You are close enough to hear the small, dry sound of the wrapper folding back, and close enough to see how the first pale tuft carries both softness and information. The Memphis cotton classer begins again with the first sample, not because the day is new now, but because each sample asks for its own beginning. The code already printed in his mind must wait until the cotton earns it. He lifts, opens, compares, and feels for staple. The clerk watches the ticket. The room holds a steady warmth, and the afternoon light makes the cotton look almost creamy against the darker wood. This sample shows a little more leaf than the last. Not enough to make the judgment difficult, but enough that the classer's eye takes its time. The leaf specks sit in the lint like tiny dark seeds, though the actual seed has long been taken away. He turns the cotton gently and lets the surface loosen. The code that follows will be plain, but it will include this small visual truth. Beside him, the clerk has copied so many marks that the letter forms have become almost bodily. The hand knows how to make an M quickly without making it careless. The hand knows how to leave space for a staple note. A blotter lies ready, worn smooth in places from long use. If you look at the ledger, the lines appear quiet and orderly, but inside each line is a small decision made by touch and sight. The odd codes quietly worked because they fit the working speed of the office. They were neither too long nor too thin. A code had to say enough, but it also had to be written, copied, read, and telegraphed by people with a day's worth of other tasks. It was a form of kindness to the system, a way to keep meaning compact without making it vanish. The best working languages do that. A buyer entering the room might not interrupt at first. He may stand near the wall, waiting until the classer finishes the sample in hand. Good manners in a working room often mean not breaking another man's concentration. The buyer carries his own sample envelopes and a folded paper with lot numbers. He smells faintly of street air, tobacco, and the wool of his coat, and the cotton room receives him without changing its pace. When the buyer does speak, he asks about a lot with a certain grade and staple. The clerk turns pages. The classer may answer from memory or look toward the samples held aside. The codes make the question manageable. Instead of searching through every bale in the building, the office can move toward the right group. A few letters guide the hand to the right paper, and the right paper guides the room to the right cotton. The buyer opens a sample and compares it with the mark. He does not need to distrust the classer in order to look. Looking is part of buying. He spreads the lint with a finger, studies the color, and draws out a little staple for himself. The classer watches quietly, perhaps with mild interest, perhaps with the stillness of someone who has already made the judgment and sees no need to defend it too soon. A disagreement, when it comes, may begin almost politely. Perhaps the buyer thinks the cotton is a shade lower. Perhaps he believes the staple is just short of the marked length. The classer may bring over the standard, or he may open another sample from the same lot. The voices remain low. The table becomes the place where uncertainty is handled, not with force but with comparison. There is comfort in the method. Nobody needs to turn feeling into noise. The cotton can be placed near the standard. The fibers can be drawn again. The samples can be reviewed side by side. The code may stand, or it may be adjusted if the evidence truly leans that way. A good working system makes room for second looks, because second looks keep trust alive. In 1920s Memphis, the cotton trade depended on such room-level negotiations. Official standards helped, but people still had to apply them. Buyers had preferences, sellers had hopes. Classes had reputations. The code sat among these human forces like a modest anchor. It did not settle every question forever, but it offered a starting point steady enough to keep business from drifting into pure argument. The buyer may finally nod, not with great satisfaction, but with acceptance. The clerk notes what must be noted. The sample is folded again, not as neatly as when first opened, but carefully enough. The classer returns to his bundle. The room resumes its earlier rhythm. What might have become a dispute has become only another small part of the day, absorbed by procedure and patience. And as that quiet question passes, we follow the code into the way Memphis offices handled mistakes, corrections, and the gentle art of making a record right. A ledger is a serious object in a cotton office. Its pages hold transactions, judgments, and connections between samples and bales. Yet ledgers are made by human hands, and human hands can slip. A wrong bale number, a poorly copied grade, a staple note placed one line too high, a smudge where clarity should be. The office knows this, so it gives correction a place in the routine. The clerk does not tear through the book in anger when a mistake appears. He draws attention to it calmly. He checks the ticket, the sample wrapper, the prior sheet, perhaps the warehouse receipt. The classer may look up, then lean over the page. A second clerk may read from another record. The room gathers around accuracy in a low, ordinary way. Because the mark matters more than anyone's pride, corrections must be legible. A messy correction can be worse than the original error. The old entry may be lined through carefully, not hidden. The correct code may be written nearby with initials or a note, depending on the office practice. Such details preserve the story of the record. They say that a person noticed, checked, and amended the line. Even error handled well becomes part of order. You can smell the ink more sharply when the clerk pauses over a correction. The pen must not blot. The paper has already taken one mark, and it will not become new again. The hand slows. The corrected code settles onto the page. The blotter comes down. A breath is released. Then the ledger returns to its larger calm, and the next line waits. The Memphis cotton classes codes worked partly because officers learned how to protect them from small failures. Samples were tied to tickets. Tickets were tied to bale numbers. Ledgers were checked against lot sheets. Messages were read back. None of these steps is grand. They are simple safeguards repeated until they seem invisible. But invisible safeguards are often the reason a system feels effortless from the outside. Sometimes a correction begins at the warehouse. A man may report that a bale tag does not match the list, or that a sample envelope carries a number that belongs elsewhere. The office pauses. The paper trail is followed backward. The bale may be found, checked, and resampled if needed. It takes time, but the time is useful. Better a slow correction than a fast mistake traveling outward. The codes themselves could be vulnerable to look-alike letters if handwriting was poor. An S might be cramped. An L might disappear into another mark. A small notation for staple might be copied unclearly. This is why trained clerks mattered. The trade language was compact, so the writing had to be clean. A short code saves time only when the reader can trust the shape of it. A good clerk's page has quiet beauty. The columns align. The marks sit comfortably in their spaces. The ink has dried without smearing. The page looks plain, but it invites confidence. You can almost feel the satisfaction of turning such a page at the end of the day, knowing that the lines will serve others without calling them back for explanations. The classer and clerk share a kind of partnership, even if their skills differ. The classer translates cotton into code. The clerk preserves code in record. One works more by touch and comparison, the other by order and accuracy. The system needs both. A perfect grade poorly recorded can mislead the trade, while a perfect ledger cannot save a careless judgment. Their quiet cooperation is the real machinery of the office. When a corrected record is finally settled, the room does not celebrate. It simply continues. The bundle of samples remains. The buyer may still be waiting. The warehouse still has bales in rows. Outside, the day moves along the Memphis streets. The ability to correct without commotion is one of the most restful qualities of steady work. It allows a person to keep faith with the task, and as the corrected line dries on the page, we drift toward the message forms and telegraph slips that carried these small cotton meanings beyond the office walls. A telegraph message has a different character from a ledger line. The ledger is meant to stay. The message is meant to travel. It must be brief, clear, and worth the cost of sending. Cotton business had long made use of compressed language because distance asked for speed and economy. The class's codes were well suited to this habit, turning physical judgment into compact signs that could move through wire. You can picture a message written in pencil first, checked, then handed for sending. The paper is thin, perhaps slightly curled at the edges. The words are few. The grade and staple appear in a form familiar to the receiving office. The sender wants no wasted phrase. Yet inside that brevity is the soft work of the classing table. The cotton opened in Memphis light, the fingers drawing staple before the mark was made. The telegraph sound is not sleepy in itself, but from a distance, it becomes part of the old business murmur. Clicks, pauses, coded words, names of cities, lot numbers, prices, acknowledgements. The cotton classer may not hear every message sent from his mark, but his work is there beneath the tapping. A handful of lint becomes a signal, then a written note somewhere else, then a decision made by someone far away. Commercial codes were often designed to save words, and cotton people were comfortable with abbreviation. A phrase could be shortened, a grade could be marked by letters. A standard trade meaning could replace a long description. To an outsider, the message might seem clipped and dry. To the receiver, it could be full enough. The art was to omit what everyone already understood, while preserving what mattered for action. The Memphis Cotton Classes Code had to survive this compression. It had to be clear when spoken, written, transmitted, and read. If a code depended on tone or private memory alone, it would fail across distance. But if it belonged to recognized trade practice, it could travel with confidence. The small mark became part of a larger language, practical and shared, like rail schedules or warehouse marks. There is something quietly elegant about this chain. Cotton fibers are soft and irregular. Telegraph signals are sharp and regular. The classes code is the bridge between them. It carries the irregular world into a form regular enough to move quickly. Then, at the receiving end, someone may open a sample or check a document and return the mark to the world of touch. Softness becomes signal, then softness again. A telegraph clerk may know cotton terms without ever classing cotton himself. He handles the language as business traffic. The letters pass through his hands. He may recognize common grades and market phrases, but the feel of staple belongs to someone else. Workplaces overlap this way. One person's special knowledge becomes another person's routine text, and the trade depends on both forms of competence. The message may reach a buyer in another city who sits at a desk under different light. He reads the Memphis marks and imagines the cotton. He may trust the office because past shipments matched their descriptions. He may ask for confirmation if the lot is unusual. The code does not replace judgment at the far end, but it gives that judgment a starting shape, enough to begin planning before the bales arrive. If a message returns, the office reads it into the day's flow. Accepted, hold, ship, reclass. Offer lower, the words may be businesslike, but each one directs hands back in Memphis. A clerk pulls a file. A warehouseman receives instructions. The classer may be asked to look again. The coded world and the physical world keep speaking to each other, back and forth, in quiet turns. And as the telegraph slips settle among the papers, we come back to the season outside, because cotton classing in Memphis changed its feel with the turning of the year. Cotton work has seasons, even when the office stays in the same place. During heavier arrival times, the room may feel fuller, the sample bundles more frequent, the warehouse aisles more crowded. The air carries more lint, more dust, more voices. The classes table becomes a steady point within the movement. In the 1920s Memphis cotton district, the season could press many bales toward the same set of patient eyes. Early in a season, the first cotton may carry a certain freshness, and talk may turn to crop prospects, weather, yield, and the character of the new arrivals. People compare the year with earlier years. They speak of rain, bowl opening, picking conditions, and gin runs. The classer listens, but his real answer comes from samples. The season may be discussed in the street, but it is confirmed in fiber on the table. As the season deepens, variation becomes clearer. Some cotton arrives bright and clean. Some carries the marks of weather changes. Later pickings may differ from earlier ones. Fields do not offer identical cotton week after week. The classes' codes help track this slow unfolding. They turn the season's changes into records, one bale at a time, so the trade can see the crop not only as volume, but as quality. On damp days, the office may feel close. Paper softens slightly under the hand. Cotton samples may seem less lively. Men wipe moisture from hats and speak of roads, delays, or river air. The classer still needs good light and dry judgment. He may wait for a sample to open properly or compare with extra care. Weather is outside, yet it enters the room through cotton, clothing, paper, and mood. On dry, bright days, dust becomes more noticeable. Lint floats easily. The table may seem covered with a pale film no matter how often it is brushed. The cotton opens differently, perhaps more freely, and the light can be generous if not too harsh. You can feel the classer's eye appreciating a bright sample under such conditions, while still guarding against the temptation to see only what pleases. Winter brings its own quiet. Coats hang near the door. A stove or heater may give the room a faint smell of metal and warmth. Cotton samples come in from cold warehouses, and hands may need a moment before they feel finely again. The classer's work continues, slower perhaps in the body, but not in care. The code must be as steady in cold light as in summer heat. Spring may be less crowded with new cotton, depending on the trade flow, but records, stored bales, disputes, shipments, and carryover lots still occupy the office. Cotton does not disappear between harvests. It waits in warehouses, moves through contracts, and reappears in samples when needed. The classer's codes remain useful beyond the first rush of arrival. A bale stored well still needs to be known accurately when it moves. The seasonal rhythm gives the job a larger breadth. Days repeat, but they are not identical. The light changes. The crop changes. The classer ages with the seasons, and his judgment gathers another layer of memory. A sample in one year may remind him of a wet season years before, or of a bright run of cotton that passed through the office in an earlier autumn. And as the seasons pass softly through the Memphis cotton room, we turn to the physical body of the classer and the way long attention leaves its mark on a working person. The cotton classer's work is not heavy like moving bales, but it has its own fatigue. The eyes work hard, the back leans, the hands repeat fine motions. Standing at a table for hours can settle into the legs. The mind must remain clear through saneness, which can be more tiring than noise in its own quiet way. At day's end, the classer may feel used by attention rather than by force. His eyes are his valued tools. Good light, rest, and habit matter. He may turn away from the table now and then, looking through the window or across the room to ease the strain of pale cotton and close comparison. He may blink against dust. He may wipe his glasses if he wears them, with a cloth kept for the purpose. The code depends on seeing, so seeing must be cared for. The hands, too, become trained and worn. Cotton feels soft, but repeated handling dries the skin. Paper edges roughen fingertips. Ink stains may settle near the nails. A small knife for string or sample paper may leave its familiar pressure in the palm. These are not dramatic injuries. They are the ordinary marks of a job that asks for precision every day. The classer's posture may change with the hour. In the morning, he stands straighter. By afternoon, he leans more heavily on one hand while studying a sample. He may sit for a difficult comparison, then stand again to catch the light. His body learns where the table height suits him and where it does not. Workplaces shape bodies through small requests repeated over years. There is also the fatigue of judgment. Choosing a code means accepting responsibility for the mark. Most samples may be straightforward, but some hover near a boundary and ask more of the mind. After enough of these, the classer may feel a quiet inward tiredness. He still writes calmly. He still checks. But the room's routines help him conserve energy, because the next step is always known. A break may be simple. A cup of coffee. A step outside. A few minutes by the door where air moves. Memphis street sounds come in more fully there. Wheels, voices, streetcar metal, riverbound freight, and perhaps the call of someone passing a warehouse. The classer breathes different air for a moment. Then he returns to cotton dust, paper, and the table's steady surface. You can feel the comfort of returning to known tools after a short pause. The pencil lies where it should. The standards are in their drawer. The next sample is ready. The body may be tired, but the order of the work reduces the burden of beginning again. Routine becomes a kind of support, holding the worker upright in the later hours of the day. In this way, the odd codes do not merely serve the market, they also serve the classer's own stamina. A compact language prevents him from writing long descriptions for every bale. Established categories prevent him from inventing a fresh explanation each time. The code gives shape to attention, so attention can last. A good system is often one that helps tired people remain careful. And as the classer's body settles back into work after its brief rest, we notice the tools around him, plain objects that make the coded judgment possible. The table is the first tool, broad, smooth enough for spreading cotton, and dark enough to show pale fiber clearly. Its surface has likely been rubbed by years of sleeves, papers, and samples. Tiny fibers catch in scratches. The edge is polished where hands have rested. A table like this does not draw notice, yet the classer depends on it every hour. It gives the cotton a place to speak. Light is another tool, though it cannot be placed in a drawer. The windows, shades, lamps, and the classer's chosen position all shape what he sees. Good natural light is prized because color matters. A sample judged under poor light may be misunderstood. The classer learns the room's best places, the hour when glare enters, and the corner where shadows make cotton look dull. He works with light as quietly as with paper. A small knife may cut string or open wrappers. It is not a dramatic blade, just a practical pocket tool, perhaps with a worn handle shaped by long use. A ruler, guide, or set of reference measures may help with staple comparisons. The standard boxes hold grade samples. Pencils, pens, blotters, tickets, and ledgers complete the working circle. None of these objects is fancy. All of them matter. The sample wrappers themselves are tools of order. They protect cotton from mixing, carry identifying marks, and allow many samples to be handled without confusion. A wrapper folded well keeps its contents together. A ticket tied securely preserves the chain between sample and bale. You can imagine the classer appreciating a neat wrapper, not because neatness is decorative, but because it saves trouble. The ledger has weight, especially when filled. Turning its pages makes a sound like cloth and dry leaves together. Its ruled columns guide the hand. Its cover protects the day's decisions. A ledger can outlast the people who wrote in it, though it asks only to be used properly in the moment. The codes in its lines may seem small, but they are held in a book made for memory. The stamp, if used, has a satisfying heaviness. Pressed onto paper, it gives official shape to an entry or receipt. The stamp pad smells of ink and oil. A date stamp, when adjusted, clicks softly through its parts, though the date itself must be written in the spoken memory of the day, rather than in our sleeping ear. These office sounds are minor, but they deepen the room's texture. A cabinet of standards deserves special mention because it joins tool and authority. The classer opens it with care, compares, and closes it again. The drawer may have a label. The samples inside may be arranged by grade, each one protected so its meaning remains reliable. You can feel how the cabinet gives the room confidence. It is a quiet library made not of words, but of cotton. The tools do not do the work alone. They steady the person who does it. The table steadies the sample. The light steadies the eye. The standard steadies the judgment. The ledger steadies the memory. The code steadies communication. Each one reduces a little uncertainty, and together they make the cotton office feel almost like a workshop of careful naming. And as these plain tools settle around us, we listen to the sound of names themselves, because cotton grades carried a vocabulary that was both ordinary and precise. Good middling sounds gentle, almost conversational. Strict middling sounds narrower, more exact. Middling sounds modest, central, familiar. Low middling sounds like a step downward, but still within the known ladder. These names were not invented for poetry, yet they have the rhythm of an old trade. The Memphis cotton classer hears them not as decoration, but as working positions in a graded world. The word strict does important work. It suggests a grade held more tightly, a quality more exact than the broader term beside it. Strict middling is not merely a compliment. It is a recognized mark. Strict low middling is not casual criticism. It is a place in the sequence. The codes shorten these names, but the full words remain behind them, like the long form of a familiar signature. Other terms may appear depending on the cotton and the standards in use. Stained, tinged, spotted, ordinary, good ordinary, and similar language can enter the room when needed. Each word must be tied to shared meaning, or it becomes only opinion. The classer's craft lies in turning a visual and tactile impression into the right accepted word, and then into the right compact code. The grade names also reveal how trade turns nature into categories. Cotton grows with endless variation. The market cannot handle endless variation directly. So people create steps, names, standards, and codes. These do not make the cotton less natural. They make it usable in a human system. The classer stands where the soft variety of the field meets the stepped language of trade. You can hear a clerk read the names aloud from an older list, perhaps while checking a set of records. The words move slowly in the warm room. Middling. Strict middling, low middling. The sound is almost hypnotic when repeated without hurry. Each term points to cotton that someone has seen, handled, and placed. The words become a map for the eye. A newcomer might ask why middling has such weight if it sounds merely average. The answer lies in trade history. Middling became a central reference point, a base around which other grades could be compared and prices adjusted. The classer does not need to explain all of this each time. He simply uses the term, and the room understands the place it holds. A good working word carries its history quietly. The codes made these names faster, but speed did not empty them. M still carried middling. SM still carried strict middling. LM still carried low middling. The letters were small doors into longer knowledge. When written clearly, they saved time. When read by trained people, they restored the fuller meaning instantly. That is why shorthand can feel almost graceful in a mature trade. There is pleasure in a vocabulary that fits its work. Not loud pleasure, not cleverness, but the ease of words that have been worn smooth by use. The classer does not search for fresh language. He reaches for the established term because it has already been tested by many hands. The code follows the term, and the record follows the code. Language becomes another tool on the table, and as the names settle back into letters, we move toward the wider Memphis cotton district, where many such tables and ledgers formed a quiet network of judgment. One classing room is intimate, but Memphis held many offices, warehouses, and trade spaces connected by cotton's movement. The city's cotton district would have carried the daily noise of business, freight, and conversation. Yet beneath that noise ran a shared structure of marks and meanings. A classer in one office and a buyer in another could speak through codes because the language had become common enough to travel across doors and streets. You can imagine walking through the district in the late afternoon. Buildings stand with practical faces, not showy, but built for storage, paperwork, and exchange. Doors open onto shadowed interiors. Men carry papers or sample envelopes. A wagon or truck passes with a low rumble. The smell of cotton appears and disappears as you move, mingling with dust, river damp, horse leather in older corners, gasoline in newer ones, and warm brick. Inside one building, a classer studies staple. Inside another, a clerk copies lot numbers. In a warehouse, men shift bales. In a broker's office, a buyer opens a sample near the window. In a telegraph room, a message condenses the day into a few business words. These activities are separate, but they are not isolated. The codes let them recognize one another. The Memphis cotton class's work was therefore both personal and communal. Personal because his eye and hand made the judgment. Communal because the judgment entered a system many others used. The mark had to be understandable outside his own head. It had to fit the standards, the ledgers, the trade practices, and the expectations of people who might never meet him. A private impression became a public code. This wider network also helped discipline the individual classer. If his marks drifted too far from accepted standards, others would notice. Buyers would question. Comparisons would reveal inconsistency. Reputation mattered. In a trade built on repeated dealings, being known as careful was valuable. The class's calm was not only temperament, it was a professional necessity, proved day after day. A district like this has its own time. Morning brings arrivals and first checks. Midday brings heat, market talk, and steady paperwork. Afternoon brings decisions, shipments, corrections, and fatigue. Evening brings closing drawers and lingering dust. The codes move through all of these hours, never as the main spectacle, but as the small functional marks that let each part know what the other part means. There is a peacefulness in imagining many offices doing similar work at once. Tables under windows, samples opened in light, clerks writing, standards consulted, bales located, questions asked and answered. Each room has its own voices, but the underlying rhythm is shared. The city becomes a large, quiet instrument, and the codes are among the notes that keep it tuned. Even disagreements across offices could be handled through the shared system. A sample might be reclassed, the standard might be consulted, an appeal might be made through proper channels. The point is that the trade had ways to bring a disputed mark back to cotton, comparison, and record. A code could be challenged, but not merely by mood. It had to return to the sample. And as the district hums softly around us, we return to one windowed room where the classer has set aside a difficult sample for a final look. The difficult sample has waited on the corner of the table, folded but not forgotten. Its ticket is still tucked beside it. The classer has moved through easier work, letting time clear his eyes before returning. This is a common wisdom in careful trades. When a judgment will not settle, leave it briefly, do honest work elsewhere, and come back when the mind is less crowded by its first struggle. Now he opens it again. The cotton spreads unevenly, showing a clean portion near one edge and more leaf deeper inside. The color is not poor, but not quite as bright as he first hoped. The staple draws fairly well, though perhaps not as generously as the buyer might prefer. It is a sample with mixed messages. The code waits like a word on the tongue. He places a standard nearby. He compares the face, then opens the sample more fully. He draws staple again. He may call another classer for a second opinion. Not because he lacks skill, but because difficult edges benefit from another trained eye. The second man leans in, handles the cotton, and says little at first. Silence is not awkward here. Silence is part of looking. They speak in low terms: color, leaf, staple, preparation. The words are familiar, but each one is tied to the sample in front of them. The second classer may agree with the first or suggest a lower mark. They compare again. The standard remains nearby, a calm third presence. The final code comes not from impatience, but from the sample slowly becoming clear enough. When the mark is written, it feels uneventful from outside. A letter, perhaps two, a note, a line completed. Yet the room has done something valuable. It has taken ambiguity and handled it without hurry. The difficult sample has found its place. The code may not satisfy every hope attached to the bale, but it fits the cotton as well as trained judgment can make it fit. The classer folds the sample back into its wrapper. The paper has softened from handling. A little lint clings to the crease. The ticket is checked once more. The clerk copies the code carefully, aware that difficult decisions especially should not be lost to sloppy writing. The ledger receives the mark, and the table is ready for the next piece of cotton. You can feel how the work teaches acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but the kind that comes after proper effort. The classer looked, compared, asked, and decided. Now the decision belongs to the record. The mind moves on, because another sample deserves the same freshness. In repetitive work, letting go is as useful as concentration. You give attention fully, then release it into the next task. And as the difficult sample joins the day's completed records, we look toward the cotton exchange and the formal trade spaces where such judgments found their larger frame. A cotton exchange is a place of rules as much as business. It gives structure to buying, selling, contracts, and disputes. It helps define what people mean when they speak about cotton in commercial terms. Memphis had long been a serious cotton city, and its exchange life formed part of the environment in which classer codes made sense. The office table and the formal market were different rooms, but they leaned on the same need for shared language. In such spaces, the atmosphere may be more public than in the classing room. Men gather, talk, watch prices, hear news, and make commitments. Papers move quickly. A quotation may matter to many desks at once, yet the cotton itself remains behind the talk. Grades and staples, standards and samples, receipts and lots, all give the market something real to stand on. Without classing, price would float too far from fiber. The classer may not spend much time on the exchange floor, but his work helps support what happens there. A futures contract, a spot sale, or a shipment agreement depends on definitions of deliverable quality and recognized grade differences. The code in the office is a daily practical cousin of those larger rules. It applies the formal language to particular bales, which is where trade becomes concrete. Rules can seem dry, but they are often tools for calm. If people agree on how to handle grade, staple, delivery, and dispute, then daily business needs less improvisation. The class's code fits into that calmer structure. It reduces uncertainty at the level of the bale. The exchange reduces uncertainty at the level of contracts. Together, they make a busy trade more orderly than it might otherwise be. You can imagine a broker moving from exchange talk back to the sample room with market news in his head and cotton fiber on his fingers. He knows price, but he still needs quality. He knows demand, but he still needs grade. The two worlds meet over the sample. A buyer's willingness may rise or fall, but the class's mark stays tied to the cotton under the light. This is why the codes quietly worked in a city like Memphis. They belonged to a complete environment. Standards gave them meaning. Offices recorded them. Warehouses attached them to bales. Brokers used them. Buyers trusted and tested them. Exchanges framed them. Telegraphs carried them. Mills acted on them. No single part made the system by itself. The code lived because the whole trade breathed through it. And as the formal trade recedes into a low background murmur, the day brings us again to ordinary paper, where the class's marks wait in files long after the cotton has moved on. Files are humble keepers of vanished work. A sample may be discarded eventually. A bale may be shipped, opened, spun, and woven. The cloth may travel into lives far away, but a paper record can remain in a cabinet carrying the code that once described that bale. In a Memphis cotton office, such files were not kept for romance. They were kept because business sometimes needed memory. A file drawer opens with a metal slide and a dull stop. Inside are folders, receipts, copies, letters, and notes. The paper edges have different colors depending on age and handling. Some sheets are crisp, others are soft from being turned many times. The codes appear among names, dates written in office form, bale numbers, weights, prices, and instructions. They are small marks in a larger paper landscape. If a question arises later, the file can be opened. What was the grade? What staple was recorded? Which bales were in the lot? Was there a condition note? The answer may be found in the class's code, copied and preserved. This is another way the mark quietly works. It helps the past become available to the present without requiring everyone to remember everything. The smell of old files is different from fresh office paper. It is drier, dustier, touched by cabinet wood and time. A clerk searching such files moves with practiced patience. He does not want to disturb more than necessary. He pulls a folder, checks a line, perhaps copies the needed mark onto a fresh sheet. The past is handled briefly, then returned to its drawer. The classer himself may never see many of these records again. He writes for the day's use, trusting the office to keep what must be kept. Yet his handwriting or initials may remain there. Years later, someone could see the mark without knowing the man's face, his voice, or the way he handled cotton. The code survives as work separated from the worker, modest and functional. There is a quiet melancholy in that, but not a dark one. Most useful labor becomes anonymous. The table is cleaned. The shipment leaves, the record is filed, the worker goes home. What remains is that the work was done well enough for the next person to rely on it. In the cotton trade, reliability was a form of memory, and the codes were little vessels of it. A filed code can also protect fairness. If someone claims a lot was sold as one quality when the record shows another, the paper can be consulted. If a shipment is questioned, the original marks can be compared with later findings. A code written clearly at the time may spare confusion weeks afterward. The classer's careful moment at the table stretches forward beyond his awareness. And as the files close again, we return to the living table, because the work is not archival while it is happening. It is warm, dusty, and immediate. Another sample arrives with a faint smell of storage. The classer opens it and pauses. The cotton is not damp, but it carries a closed odor, perhaps from the warehouse or wrapping. He lets it sit open for a moment. Air moves through the loosened fibers. The smell softens. He does not hurry to mark condition until he has given the sample a fair chance to show what belongs to the cotton and what belongs only to confinement. This distinction matters in many trades. What is the object itself, and what is only the circumstance around it? Cotton can seem different when compressed, wrapped, stored, or freshly opened. The classer's patience helps separate temporary impression from actual quality. The code should describe the bale, not the momentary stale breath of the wrapper, unless that breath points to a real condition. He draws the staple and finds it decent. The color is a little dull, but not badly so. Leaf is moderate. Preparation is fair. The final mark is not remarkable. Most marks are not remarkable. That is part of the calm. A day may include a few difficult samples, but much of the work is ordinary cotton finding ordinary codes. Ordinary accuracy is the heart of the job. You sit with that ordinariness, and it becomes soothing. The sample opens. The classer considers. The clerk writes. The room breathes. Outside wheels pass and voices fade. Inside, the table continues. The codes are odd only if seen from far away. Up close, they are as natural as labels in a pantry, as natural as marks on a carpenter's bench, as natural as any working language that helps hands remember what eyes have learned. The Memphis cotton classer may keep a small notebook of personal reminders or observations, though the official records belong elsewhere. He might note recurring crop qualities, problem lots, or buyer preferences. He might not. Many skilled workers carry such notes in memory instead. The mind becomes a private ledger, arranged not in columns, but in impressions gathered over seasons. He may remember a run of cotton from a certain district as bright and clean one year, then duller the next. He may remember which gins tend towards smoother preparation. He may remember buyers who are particular about staple. This knowledge does not replace standards, but it gives context. The code still comes from the sample, yet the experienced classer hears faint echoes around it. Those echoes must be handled carefully. Prior knowledge can help, but it can also mislead. A bale from a respected source can still be poor. A lot expected to be ordinary can surprise the hand. The classer's discipline is to let memory inform without ruling. He returns to the cotton itself, because the cotton on the table is the only cotton being coded now. This return is one of the most peaceful ideas in the work. Whatever the market says, whatever the season suggests, whatever a buyer expects, the sample rests in front of you. You do not need to solve the whole trade. You need to read this cotton honestly, then the next, then the next. A large world becomes manageable through a sequence of small, complete acts. And as that sequence carries the afternoon forward, we notice the social quiet of the room, the small courtesies that let many people work near one another without wearing each other down. A cotton office can be busy without being chaotic. People learn where to stand, when to speak, how long to wait, and which questions can interrupt a class's eye. A clerk may place a new bundle at the side of the table rather than directly in front of the sample being judged. A warehouse man may lower his voice when numbers are being checked. Such courtesies are not written in every rule book, but they keep the room workable. The classer may answer a question with only a few words, not from rudeness, but because the sample holds his attention. Others understand. They have seen what happens when a mark is made too quickly or a number is misheard. The quiet around the table is a shared investment in accuracy. Even the impatient learn to soften their pace near the cotton. There may be moments of mild humor, but nothing sharp. A familiar buyer complains gently about the heat. A clerk mutters that the ink has a mind of its own. Someone brushes lint from his sleeve and says it follows him home. The room smiles, then returns to work. Warmth in such places does not need performance. It is enough that people know one another's habits and let the day pass without unnecessary strain. The codes themselves can become part of this social ease. Instead of long debates, people can refer to recognized marks. Instead of explaining a whole sample each time, the classer can say the grade and staple, and the room understands. Shared shorthand reduces friction. It lets people be brief without being cold. In a workplace, that is a quiet gift. A young office boy may carry papers between rooms, learning the trade by errands before he understands the meanings. He hears the codes spoken. He sees sample envelopes stacked by lot. He smells cotton dust in every room. Over time, the strange letters become familiar sounds. Perhaps he will become a clerk, warehouseman, broker, or classer. The trade enters people gradually, through footsteps and repeated words. The Memphis Cotton District would have had many such gradual learners. Sons, nephews, hired boys, young clerks, men shifting from warehouse labor to office work, and others finding their place in the cotton economy. Not all would become expert classers, but all would learn that the codes mattered. They would learn which papers not to misplace, which samples not to mix, which marks required a careful eye. You can feel the hierarchy, but also the interdependence. The classer has authority over grade, the clerk controls the record. The warehouseman knows the physical location of bales, the broker knows buyers. The messenger carries information between rooms. Each person's knowledge is partial, and the system works because those partial knowledges meet through routine. The code is one meeting place among many. As the day lengthens, voices may grow quieter, not from sadness, but from spent energy. The room has used much attention. The classer writes more slowly. The clerk checks more deliberately. People who have worked together know that late-day mistakes are easy, so they lean on habit. Read back, compare, place the ticket, close the drawer. The courtesies become even more valuable as fatigue gathers. And as fatigue gathers softly around the table, the classer turns toward the final lot of the day, a group of bales whose codes must align well enough for shipment. The final lot lies represented by a row of samples, each one folded open on the table. The cottons are similar, but not identical. One is a shade brighter. One carries a little more leaf. One has staple that may be just under the desired mark. The classer studies them as a group because a lot is judged not only by its parts, but by how those parts sit together. He moves from sample to sample in a slow line. His hand repeats the same gestures, opening, lifting, drawing, smoothing, then resting briefly before the next. The clerk's pencil waits. The buyer's instructions may be on a paper nearby. The warehouse will need the final decision before pulling bales. The codes must bring the group into order without pretending away the differences that remain. A lot can tolerate small variation if it falls within expected bounds. It cannot tolerate hidden unevenness that will trouble the buyer or mill. The classer's task is to decide whether the bales belong together under the proposed description. He may mark one out. He may lower the lot expectation. He may ask for another sample. The decision is practical and quiet, but it shapes the shipment. The difficult bale in the lot is examined again. Its color is acceptable, perhaps barely. Its staple feels a little short beside the others. The classer lays it near the stronger samples. and sees the difference more clearly. He does not force it to belong just because the paperwork would be easier. A code that quietly works must sometimes say no. Not loudly, not stubbornly, simply no. The clerk notes the separation. The warehouse will set that bale aside or place it in another lot where it fits better. The remaining group becomes more even. The buyer, if present, may accept the adjustment with a nod. Everyone understands that this small inconvenience protects the larger trust. It is better to make the lot true now than to let disappointment travel with it. The codes for the final lot are copied carefully. Bale numbers line up. Grades match the class's decision. Staple notes are checked. A condition note, if needed, is included. The list becomes an instruction set for the warehouse. Paper directs movement. Movement confirms paper. The old routine turns from judgment into action, and action turns back into record. You can almost feel the day easing as the lot comes into order. The table still holds cotton, but the hardest decisions have passed. The classer brushes lint from his fingertips. The clerk stretches his hand and flexes it once before continuing. Outside, the street light has changed again, and the air coming through the window carries more evening than afternoon. The final lot is not a conclusion. It is one more passage in the ongoing life of the cotton district. Tomorrow there will be another lot, another buyer, another difficult sample, another corrected line. But for this hour, this group of bales has been named and arranged. The codes have done what they were asked to do. They have made the cotton easier to understand and safer to move. And as the final lot's papers are carried toward the warehouse, we remain near the table where a little loose lint still waits to be cleared. The classer gathers the loose cotton lightly, not squeezing it, though it no longer needs judging. Habit remains gentle, even when the sample is spent. He sets aside what must be kept and discards what is only waste. The distinction is clear in the room. Some cotton represents a bale and must be protected. Some is stray fiber, detached from record, no longer able to speak for anything. Order depends on knowing the difference. Sample envelopes are stacked by purpose, those needed for buyer review in one place, those tied to completed records in another, those waiting for recheck at the corner. The table clears in zones, each one with meaning. To a visitor, it may look like ordinary tidying. To the workers, it is the last safeguarding of the day's judgments. A sample misplaced at closing can undo morning care. The clerk reads the final entries. His voice is lower now, and the room listens with the calm of people ready to go home but not yet released. The classer confirms. The warehouseman takes his list. A drawer closes. Somewhere, a key turns. The day's cotton has been changed into codes, lots, records, and instructions, and the room begins again to look like itself, without work spread across it. Still, the smell remains. Cotton dust in warm wood, ink in paper, a trace of sweat in coat cloth, street air at the window. These smells are not unpleasant when softened by evening. They are the honest mixture of a place where people have been useful. You breathe them in gently, and the work feels close, even if the era itself is far away. The Memphis cotton classer may pause before leaving, looking once more over the cleared table. Not sentimentally, perhaps not even consciously. Workers often check a room with their eyes before trusting it to the night. Standards closed, ledger covered, tickets placed, samples secured, window considered, lamp ready. Each small confirmation helps the mind step away without carrying too much unfinished work home. But one paper remains near the edge of the desk, a message received late, asking about a lot that will need attention in the morning. The classer sees it and places it where it belongs, not to solve it now, but to let tomorrow find it easily. This too is part of calm labor. Not every task must be finished at once. Some are simply prepared for the next hand, which may be your own. And with that late message set in its proper place, the work shifts toward morning before morning has arrived, and the quiet code waits for another sample under another light.